Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am the Creative Contessa and welcome to my medieval sewing party. This is episode 99. So if you end up enjoying this, you might want to check out the other many episodes that we have. Okay, looks like maybe we just now went live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am the Creative Contessa and welcome to my medieval sewing party. Today I have an exciting new experiment to share with all of you. I have been talking for some time about the lacing of my gown and specifically attaching an egglet onto the tip of it by finger loop braiding, by making a lace directly onto the bodkin, and today we're going to be doing that. I actually already set it up because there was a lot of fiddling and experimentation with how to go about it, but I have figured out a way to actually set up the finger loop braiding, the lace, the loops for the lace are directly onto the bodkin, and now we're going to actually braid the lace directly onto the bodkin so that I no longer have to worry about losing them anymore the way I have lost all of the ones I have that I purchased from that bodkin maker. Now I've had to make my own. So once I get my kerchief on, I'm going to actually show you what I've set up. I'm very excited by the prospect. So first off, of course, can you hear me is the very important question. Here is what's going to happen. Here are the loops, right? So Dorothy, I know you won't be here for long. I'm so sorry. I ended up needing to take a nap before I could go live. So here is that bodkin I mentioned. And as you can see, I actually have the boas, as they're called in 15th century English, directly built upon it directly. And so now I'm going to anchor this to this chair that I have conveniently set up next to me, and I'm going to finger loop braid it directly onto the bodkin. This is what it looks like in the portrait in which I've seen this exact item. It looks like it's woven directly onto the bodkin, and so we're about to do that. And I'm pretty certain that this is going to work out really well. Fingers crossed. And if it does work out really well, we actually have the materials to make more of these, and I'm actually thinking of making and selling these. So let me know if that's an item you might like to purchase from me. Haas, good morning. Good morning. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Yeah. Oh, don't cup. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for that lovely greeting. So I just have to actually anchor this on. And I have been using this really thick ribbon as my anchor, but I don't think I want to leave that much of a gap in the end here necessarily. Let me see how much of a gap it'll leave on if I actually attach it this way. So yeah, I've got two things I'm going to be working on today. I'm going to be making this lace, and the lace again is the thing that I use to lace up my gowns. Right onto that bodkin. And then we're going to work on the other cuff for my new so-called Burgundian gown. So those two things, those are my big goals for today's project. Let me know if you all are working on a project of your own. Do let me know in the comments. For those of you who are foodies, and if any of my Koreans are out there watching me, I had no idea that I could cause so much offense and what's the word I'm looking for? Controversy by suggesting an updated and fusion method for preparing and eating dolsot bibimbap. Dolsot bibimbap is a traditional Korean dish. Bibimbap is basically, it's a rice bowl. There is rice on the bottom and then an assortment of various toppings put on top of it. And then that's done in a stone pot so that the rice is actually cooking again. It's toasting basically against this super hot stone pot. And it's traditionally served with broth. And we recently discovered that if you take your broth and you pour it directly into the stone pot and you stir it, then the broth actually turns the rice into this creamy risotto-like dish, and it really enhances it and makes it even more delicious. But apparently that is both disrespectful of me to have done that and insanity and completely wrong. I have been informed by several very rude commenters on my channel, on my Travels with the Creative Contessa channel. Who would have thought that suggesting an update to a dish might be be so controversial. In fact, it wasn't me who I'm not the first person I saw pour soup onto their dulsop bibimbap. I've seen Koreans here in Daegu do it too. So I got news for you. I didn't invent it. Me, a Westerner, didn't invent the idea. I've observed other people doing it. Oh, Kati, lovely. A laurel scroll. What's your inspiration? Are you inspired by a specific era or geography for the writ? That's pretty wonderful. Okay, so I'm just going to, now I've anchored it, I'm going to go ahead and place this. I'm going to attach it now to my chair of braiding, my lace making chair, as I call it. This is my oh so professional setup. I have, nope, yep, there it is. Hand weight, 10 pounds, which is about like 4 kilograms. And that chair, and then I'm using a chair specifically that has bars so that I have a space around which I can anchor this. So yeah, so here we go. This is just going to be a regular broad lace of 5 boas, as they're called in the manuscript. So nothing fancy, just practical, specifically for being able to lace up my gowns and doublets and other such garments. So I've been wanting to try this for a while, and I keep talking about trying it. So we're going to go ahead and do it. We're going to try it. Okay, fantastic. And I specifically made these bows really long so that I could have a really long lace that will work on any gown or doublet that I have. So yeah. Well, Susan, it may sound delicious, but apparently it's horrifying to some people. I have a sneaking suspicion that the people who are offended are not Koreans, as in Koreans living in Korea, but like second-generation Koreans who don't accept that cuisines can evolve and that there could be more interesting, different ways of doing things that are still also acceptable. They're the same people who object when I wear hanbok, generally, which is not Koreans. Koreans do not object when I wear hanbok. They love it when I wear hanbok. Yeah. Okay. Just setting up my braiding here. Oh, Donkev, thank you for that lovely compliment. Much appreciated. Yeah. So let's see. What have I been doing lately? My condottiero, Ryan, returned recently from a journey to the Americas, and he brought back with him a lot of books. So I am going to be very interested to see, running into the problem that these loops do not want to separate out neatly, which shouldn't be a problem because it was warped very, very evenly and very quickly, but they don't want to separate out at all. That means I may have to work on this. I may have to work on this, fix this up, not in the live stream, and redo this so that the bows will actually come apart, because what's unfortunately happened is the bows have somehow gotten twisted on themselves, even though they shouldn't be, because of the way I warped it up. And so now they don't want to come apart neatly. So I might be doing this off camera. And once I figure out what is causing the issue, then might do it again in a live stream. Yeah, this is unfortunate. Be very frustrating. So Katie says, my inspirations always come from the recipient. In this case, it's an Elizabethan maritime theme with references to his passion for yeast brewing and making perries. Oh, interesting. It's funny, by the time you get into the Elizabethan era, there's a decline in the decorative arts for books because of the printing press. It's not gone. It's a decline. There's less. There is a much smaller host of exemplars from the 16th century than there are from the 15th century. There's a fantastic book of hours from the 15th century, the Hours of Catherine of Cleves, which the reason I mention that is because each page is themed. Each page in this book is themed, and it is a stunning piece of what I call book art, of illuminated art. And each page, you know, there's a page that's themed bakery, and everywhere in the margins, there's all these baked goods depicted. And, you know, that's what I was thinking when you said reference for brewing. There is a brewing page in the Hours of Cleves, of Catherine of Cleves as well. So, you know, it's the idea of having a themed illuminated page is definitely a medieval idea to theme each of your illuminated pages in a way that doesn't necessarily reflect on what the text is at all, in the case of Catherine of Cleves. Yeah, Catherine of Cleves is beautifully. Yeah, the charts. So charters, that's the other thing. In the SCA, there's this tendency to give people writs, these massively illuminated writs, as though they were a page from a book of hours. But the reality is that writs and charters weren't illuminated. You'd have a decorative capital or capitals in some cases, but like there's no illumination. I personally prefer to receive like the charters. I prefer to receive written the charters that are actually like a charter would have been, a patent, like a patent of arms would have been in the Middle Ages, rather than the illuminated pages. But you know, I certainly do appreciate every single amazing piece of art I have received from the extremely skilled, gifted, and generous artisans in the SCA who share their talents for free to produce those amazing works of art. I have some pretty stunning ones. Unfortunately, none of them are here. Okay, yep. I'm going to have to fiddle with this later. So onward to the Burgundian sleeve. So what am I talking about when I say the Burgundian sleeve? So this is the sleeve. It's currently inside out. Let's go ahead and turn it right side out. Yeah, Catherine of Cleves, Book of Hours. If you haven't seen it, go look it up. Go look it up. It is an absolutely masterful and delightfully whimsical book of hours. It's completely different from any other book of hours I've ever examined. And I was privileged to see a special exhibit on the Catherine of Cleves Book of Hours back in 2011 or early, I think it was 2012. 2012, back in 2012. In Rotterdam, there was a special exhibit on the hours of Catherine of Cleves. They actually laid out every single page for, because it wasn't, apparently it was easy to unbind it. It was not bound in a way that it couldn't be unbound. And so we were actually able to go and examine firsthand through glass the pages of Catherine's hours, and it was, yeah, absolutely stunning. And there was a whole exhibit about peripheral aspects of the culture of, you know, late medieval Flanders, of 15th century Flanders and the Netherlands. So it was a really fantastic exhibit, from which I of course bought the exhibit catalogs, and so, you know, they've been in my collection for years at this point. Oh, very cool. Yeah, Rotterdam has, you know, I've been to Rotterdam several times at this point, actually. Yeah, it really was a fantastic experience. Yeah. They had some clothing that was supposedly reconstructed from Catherine, you know, from Catherine of Cleves, from her era, basically. And I say, it was a little disappointing for museum replicas of medieval clothing. I'll just put it that way. Okay, so here is the sleeve I'm talking about. And you can see how nicely it fits over top of my curdle, which is the point, because this sleeve will be part of the overgown, which will go over top of this kind of curdle. So, you know, it was very important when I made the pattern that I patterned it on top of the curdle so that it would fit, right? Because layers and layers and layers. If you're ever making clothes, if you're making an ensemble, start with the underlayers, build your way out, because if you don't do that, you're going to be very sad when the top layer is way too tight in places that are uncomfortable, right? So especially in 15th century clothing, 14th, 15th century, 16th century clothing where it's really fitted, you need to start with the bottom layers, smock, then the curdle or the coat, depending on your era, and then the coat hardy or the gown over top of that so that everything fits. Okay, so here is the sleeve. Looks nice, right? Okay, but this is going to go inside. This is the cuff that goes inside. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to be attaching this as the lining of the cuff, basically. Right now they're two separate layers, but they won't be. This is just to give you an idea of what's going to, the function here. Right, and then when I want to cuff my sleeves, as I often do in this ensemble, it looks like that, right? So that's what's happening with these pieces that I'm making right now. This is where they're going to go. So now we are going to, last night at my cafe medieval crafting session, we basically put the seams in and we turned the hem. And now I'm actually at a decision part where I have to decide whether I want to actually really finish this properly, thoroughly, by adding a band all the way around and just kind of covering up that seam. I may or may not do that. I have to decide how fastidious I want to be. We don't know how this may or may not have been made actually in the 15th century, because none of these dresses have survived. I've never found a dress like this one that has survived in any part whatsoever. So we don't know, you know, if they would have also finished a cuff like this, a cuff lining, if they would have actually added a band to cover, you know, a strip basically facing to cover the seam here and make it nice and neat or not. We don't know. Modernly, yeah, in haute couture, you definitely would. But that might not be the medieval approach. Yeah, we can never assume that things we do now are the way they've always done them, despite some people think that. Let me see, I got to go to the Rijksmuseum last fall and stand virtually nose to nose with canvas with Dutch masters. Yeah, so I lived, some of you might not know this, I lived in Europe for 12 years. So yeah, I've spent a lot of time in European museums. That's why I was able to go to that exhibit in Rotterdam after an SCA event. We just made a little, the event was in Ghent, and we were actually, that was an event at a 17th century powder house. So that was cool. And then we just made the extra half-hour ride up to Rotterdam, visited the museum, and then drove home to Germany. So yeah, I grew very accustomed to having medieval art at my fingertips. Like the museum in the village where I lived had a small collection of medieval artifacts just from the local village. So yeah, it's a different kind of thing. So yeah, I'm still deciding on whether I'm going to cover the facing here. What I mean, if it's a different kind of thing, it's different than looking at things in a book, right? Is what I meant. But also, when you look at things in a book, no one huffs at you or blows a whistle at you for being too close to the painting, because that's never happened to me in a museum. So yeah, so now I'm just to the point of deciding whether or not I'm going to cover this edging in facing. But in the meanwhile, I have time to think about that, because in the meanwhile, we're going to go ahead and put these two together to make a cuff, to make the cuff lining, and then we're going to baste it, and then I will mark the hem, I will mark the seam rather, and then we will stitch it. So for those of you who have not worked, had the privilege and joy of working with velvet, velvet is annoying. Velvet is annoying for many reasons. It's three-dimensional in ways that other fabrics without a pile are not. It can have a direction that if you don't pay attention to the direction of the pile, then you'll actually get strange pattern effects. Well, you will have pattern effects that may or may not be strange and beautiful. You know, because of the three-dimensionality, it wants to shift, it wants to move. You have to make certain that when you're doing your stitches, that the same amount is taken on the top that's taken on the bottom. Silk velvet, and this is silk velvet, the pile is silk. So the pile is silk, thank God the ground is not. 100% silk velvet, as I've said before, and I'll say it again, is proof that God hates us. Silk velvet is the devil's work. It is 100% silk velvet is, because if you have a silk ground, then it slinks, it moves, it's sentient like an octopus. And I think just as intelligent as an octopus. Therefore, it just makes it really hard to work with. That's why I prefer silk velvet, wherein the pile, the part that you see is silk, fantastic. And the ground, the part that you don't see, is a much more, much less flexible, much less sentient fiber, such as cotton or linen. Okay, yeah, velvet is sentient. It 100% is. And the second you add a silk ground to it, it becomes super sentient, to the point of perhaps being possessed by a demon. Susan says, living in Germany, did you see the Riemenschneider sculptures? I have indeed seen many, Riemenschneider sculptures in Nuremberg specifically. Yep, I have. Yeah, Riemenschneider, and actually I think he has some pieces in Würzburg also. Yeah, I have seen many of Riemenschneider's works. Let me tell you, when you live in Germany, you get a whole new appreciation for wooden sculpture. It's one of, unfortunately, in the fine arts, stone sculpture is considered much more refined than sculpting in wood. But that is selective snobbery. The same way that we have separated the fine arts from the handcrafts, like there's somehow one is more refined and elegant than the other. It's not. I'm sorry. Just because you paint, just because your art is created with paint and canvas, or paint and plaster, or stone sculpture, that doesn't make it any more of an art than someone who embroiders, than someone who weaves, than someone who sews, than someone who tailors, than someone who carves, gems or casts gold, or, makes things out of cast gold. I think that is a snobbery. And I meant to look that up because I was just thinking to myself, I'm not certain at the point at which the fine arts were separated from the handcrafts, but that seems like something that might have happened in the 16th century. Especially that seems like something that Villani might have actually undertaken. Yeah. Velvet isn't alive, at least silk velvet is, and its main job is to drive us crazy. Yeah, if I never work in 100% silk velvet again, it will be too soon. That's literally hours of my life I will never ever get back, sadly. And again, because the backing is not, if the ground is not shown, then it doesn't really matter if it's silk or not. Now, finding silk velvet that's as densely woven as medieval silk velvet is, that's tricky. Even the expensive upholstery silk velvets that you can get now from fashion houses, I have not seen anything that is as dense and as lush as the piles that I've seen in museums in Europe. And I have not examined any of those silk velvet garments personally, like on the same side of the glass, but I have certainly put my face against the glass and gotten huffed at and looked at them. Looked at many 15th century vestments are pretty much the only silk velvet garments that survive, of which I can think, from the 15th century. But yeah, those vestments made out of, high-low silk velvet, or even, cloth of gold, which is brocaded often with silk velvet sometimes. Yeah, that's pretty amazing stuff. And it definitely gives you an appreciation for the cost of fabric when you look at fabrics like that in person and realize how much time and effort it takes to weave something like that. Because the pile, you have to cut the pile. Most people don't realize this. With velvet, historically, someone had to go through, just like with a carpet, someone had to go through and manually shear the pile so that the loops would actually be cut off. So someone had to do that by hand. Someone had to do it in such a way that it stayed relatively even and flat. It's quite a task, actually. So again, but that's a handcraft. That's not an art. Yeah, so Kati is working on manuscripts in an Elizabethan style, which is pretty cool. Kati, do you work with, what are your preferred materials? Do you work with heavy art paper, or do you work with pergaminata, or do you work with vellum, quills, pens? What are your preferred tools? I love working with vellum, even though it's much trickier to prepare than other writing surfaces. I really love working with vellum myself, and I really love working with a quill. It's so satisfying when I successfully accomplish actual lettering that looks nice with a quill. I definitely feel like I've accomplished a lot more than with my calligraphy pens. Which is not a criticism to anyone who uses calligraphy pens. I want to make this clear. Um, that isn't the point of what I'm saying. I'm acknowledging that it is really just that much harder to work with a quill or a medieval pen, as they were called, than it is to work with, our much more convenient and much simpler to use calligraphy pens, where you don't have to worry about the flow of the ink, and you don't have to worry about keeping that tip sharp, and you don't have to worry about cutting the quill properly and not shattering the tip while you're doing the cutting. Okay. Velvet, thou art the bane of my existence. Okay, well, I'm going to call this good on the pinning front. So remember, for those of you who are getting into hand sewing, remember that unlike with a machine, you will need to do basting. We should do basting. You should never just hand sew something that's straight up pinned, because the pinning is going to actually lead to deformations in your seam. So what you do is you pin it, then you put basting stitches in, which I'm about to demonstrate, and then you put in your final seam. Yeah. Let me say, I never expected medieval fashion would be interesting to me. My passion is studying cosmology and learning about the inner workings of the universe. But lately, I also have a new passion for history and writing, which I didn't expect. Well, don't cap. Thank you. Welcome. Well, I don't know if I'm not going to take credit for that new passion, but I'm excited for you having discovered a new thing about which to be excited. My condottiere Ryan and I earlier were discussing how odd it is when we read stories about immortals who develop this pathetic ennui, how they grow terribly bored of life. And we were discussing how we don't understand that. We don't understand how someone could just get bored at living forever, because there are so many interesting things to learn in this world. So many interesting things, so many languages, so many kinds of foods you can learn to make, so many different arts and crafts you can learn to do, so much science, so much math, new discoveries constantly taking place, so much history to learn, so many books and poems and theories and essays to read. How could you possibly ever get bored? There will always be something new to learn, some new passion you can discover. And so I can only think that either these authors who hypothesize that immortality would eventually lead to ennui, I can only hypothesize that they either think that their fellow man is very dull indeed, or that they themselves aren't actually that curious as a writer, and so they can't understand how anyone else could actually be that curious. Personally, I would love immortality as long as it comes with eternal youth. I do not want that horrifying kind of immortality where you just slowly rot, but you continue, living forever and ever and ever. That would be horrifying. But eternal, immortality plus eternal youth, no problem. I am there for it. Let me see. Kati says, when doing period scrolls, I love working on goat parchment. Nice. I use a quill, but I tend to mush them. Yeah, don't we all? So I usually have 2 or 3 depending on the script length. I use pergaminata for grant GOAs and AOAs. Yeah, awesome, Kati. Yeah, I tend to mush the tips of my quills also. Have you ever used a quill pen? It's actually an extant. It is an extant thing. They actually had metal pens that were basically like quills, but just made out of metal. Have you ever tried using one of those? I haven't. There is a calligrapher and illuminator in the mid realm who has made them. I don't know if he has any currently. They're made of a copper alloy. I've been wanting to try them just because I'm curious how different it feels. Presumably, as you say, there'll be less chance of mushing the tip if it's made of metal than if it's made of the proteins that make up a feather. Let me see. Don't Cop says, there's so much to discover and explore in this world. One lifetime is not enough. It really is not. I'm frustrated at only having one lifetime. I really am. I keep hoping that they'll discover, somehow they will discover the secret to immortality, selective immortality, and that I can take advantage of it before I die. So that is my hope. My grandmother also hoped the same. She was hoping that the secret of stem cells would unlock immortality in her lifetime because I get my curiosity, I come by it rightly and genetically. She wanted the same thing. She wanted the chance to keep exploring and learning. So I can only hope that that what she hoped would happen in her lifetime actually happens in mine. We'll see. Don't Cup says, they say a reader lives 1,000 lives while a non-reader only lives one. Yeah, I agree with that. That's a very wise thing. And Kati says, I just picked one up at Penzik, but she hasn't used it yet. I've been busy with 9 peerage scrolls. Oh my God. Kati, 9 peerage scrolls. You are a saint. Someone should absolutely be giving you some kind of, I don't know, canonization. That is an insane number of peerage scrolls to be working on. Goodness gracious. Yeah, that's another thing that really frustrates me about members of the SCA is a lot of them just come to expect these writs, these beautiful illuminated pages, these beautifully calligraphed pages, just as a matter of course, and no one actually seems to stop and realize that the scribes who are painstakingly creating these amazing works of art are rendering a massive level of service, right? Everyone just views it as an art. Well, it's an art, and they don't view it from the service side of the art. There is, of course, it's an art. It is also a service. And so, in that recognition system, I really strongly believe that scribes should be recognized with service awards, 100%. I'm not a big cookie person. Like I personally don't need cookies to keep doing what I'm doing, but I know that it is very important to people to receive recognition, and that's not a criticism. And so I really do believe that scribes especially should be recognized for service. You're not just making books of hours that you're selling, right? So yeah, that is one hell of a service, Kati. If other people haven't shown their gratitude appropriately, let me show my gratitude for what you are doing for people, to give them these amazing mementos of their accomplishments. Yeah. I'm really glad to know you are appreciated, Kati. It's, yeah, you deserve to be. Yeah, Gilbeline, the SCA has a lot of, there are some really beautiful aspects of the SCA, and those are the aspects that have kept me doing SCA, even though I've obviously also, sort of hied off and done some of my own things, because the organization itself has a really beautiful approach to exploring medieval material culture, to sharing knowledge, to doing things for each other. And that's not true in all or even most reenactment groups, shall we say. Of course, then we're going to get into the debate of whether the SCA is reenactment. It's not, by the way. I would never look at the SCA or any organization like it and call it reenactment. I would say it's recreationism. It's kind of probably the best word for it. It's not really necessarily living history. There are living history components in the SCA, but I wouldn't say that as a whole that is the purpose of the organization, at least not the way in which we live it. But it definitely, I wouldn't be where I am without the SCA. There's no way. I come from Delaware. I come from the United States. When I was coming up in the reenactment living history world, there were no alternatives in my part of the world to the SCA. So if there had been no SCA, there would have been nothing, right? I didn't grow up in Europe, where every single village has its own reenactment group that focuses on whatever history is important to that village. Where I grew up, Rev War was the big thing. Revolutionary War. That was what everyone was doing. But the Rev War didn't interest me. Still doesn't. Except as an academic, an academic function of getting us to where we are now. But I'm not really particularly excited to be reenacting the culture of the Revolutionary War, shall we say. Yeah, Kati, I think the people who really, it's funny, the people who want yeah, I know some people who were so desperate for the cookies that they quit when they didn't get them when they thought they deserved them. And I kept telling these people, if you love what you do, then just keep doing it. If you're only doing it for the cookie, you should stop doing it. You know, and again, I do believe in awards. I believe that recognition is important. And there's some people for whom it's more important than others. There's different kinds of recognition, obviously. And for some people, that official recognition is really key. It's not to me. So, yeah. Yeah, Kati, I've had a lot of time to think about the SCA and philosophize about it, especially because when I was living in Europe all those years, I was a big mover and shaker in Drachenwald, and especially at the local level, I was trying to build up the SCA in Germany because that was about the time that all of the American bases had just closed, and so we had a massive drop in our population, and so we had to rely on locals, Germans actually, to populate the SCA. And so I had to figure out a way to communicate what was different and what was different and valuable about the SCA versus the other reenactment communities. And invariably, the aspects that I landed on that were different was the sharing of knowledge, the open and encouragement, enthusiastic sharing of discoveries of research and knowledge for free, basically. That's not something that's done in many reenactment groups. A lot of people hoard their knowledge in the medieval communities in Europe. Also that, you could explore a wide array of geographies and eras within the Middle Ages in the SCA, whereas in every other reenactment group, you basically, whatever the reenactment group does, it's April 3rd, 1472 in Hampshire, England, right? And that's what you do. So you can actually have more of opportunity to explore different things. It's more like a medieval buffet, medieval material culture buffet, where you can explore different aspects before you settle on one that fits you best, if you even ever settle on one that fits you best. And there's also there is the role-playing aspect, the court, right? You have this hierarchy that is built into the organization that helps provide, I think, a better context for a lot of what we do than just a bunch of friends getting together. Yeah. No, sorry. Gotta do this to make it come back. Okay, all. Let me see. Kati says, I know those people too. I'm privileged to be in a position to tell crowns no. I have my cookies. Yeah. In my nearly 40 years in the SCA, the knowledge sharing is the absolute best part. Yeah. The knowledge sharing is really where it's at. It's, I go to Pennsic, so I'm now a professional medieval living historian. People pay me to go to their events and share my knowledge with them. And there's a lot of reasons this is now professionally what I do, and it has to do with the machines eating my career as a translator. Anyway, point is that I do this professionally. That being said, I go to Pennsic every year for 2 weeks, and I teach 3 to 4 hours of high-level dance classes every day. High level in the sense of very well-structured classes, very well researched, for free. Because I enjoy sharing that knowledge, and that's Pennsic is a beautiful place where you can really get a lot of ideas, share a lot of ideas that are otherwise might never actually see the light of day, right? Because especially in an official academic setting, research that goes against the canon is not always encouraged in academia, by the way. And, if you don't have a PhD, very often any research you do will just be poo-pooed out of hand. Whereas an organization like the SCA allows laymen to actually research and invest their ideas and their ingenuity and their curiosity into a subject, devise new ideas, do new research, bring new research to the table, and actually spread it to an audience of people who will really appreciate it and put those ideas to use. So yeah. Yes, I used to be a translator. I guess I still am technically. Yeah, I'm a linguist by trade. That's what brought me to Europe, actually. Yeah, I used to translate English, German, French, and Spanish into English. And I lived in Germany, and I worked for German companies. My last employer in Germany was Merck, the big life science, they call themselves a life science company now. And yeah, then I ended up having to leave to follow my soldier husband's the beat of my soldier husband's drum, which meant I had to quit my full-time job. I went freelance, and then eventually there was just no more freelance work in my language fairs, not that wanted to pay any kind of decent wage. Yeah, translation is a dead field. Professors of translation at universities are telling their students now, if you want a job, this is not the career for you. Only study translation if it's fun, if it's interesting. Otherwise, do something else, right? That's where translation is at right now, because of machine translation, because of translation apps, because of AI, because of machine learning, right? It's all killed the career field. There are still some niche languages where you could possibly still find work as a translator, but eventually those languages will be also mapped and conquered. Most of the work now for translators is working for software companies to help them teach their translation software and their machines and their servers on how to translate properly. So yeah, there's no more, it's a dead career field. So I had to find something else to do. I thought about transitioning my language skills into computer programming, coding, but then I realized that by the time I learned and trained and got good enough to actually be employed, that probably the machines would be doing that too. So why bother? Why bother investing more time and energy in yet another career that's going to be eaten by the machines? It's what led me down the content creation route, and it's what led me to start actually professionally teaching medieval and Renaissance dance, teaching workshops on medieval handcrafts, because I'm hoping that this will be the last thing to be taken by the machines. Yeah. Yep. I studied German in school. Also, as a kid, I worked a tiny bit on the start of my own language for an imaginary alien race. That's super cool, Captain. The reenactments here in the Netherlands are always about World War II. Seeing and hearing it every year made me lose interest about that part of my history. Yeah, I can bet. Yeah, so or as Kati says, if you want a PhD, I had to be able to translate for mine. Yeah, so although now you no longer need to be able to translate for your PhD because there's machines for that. Of course, that's dangerous. I'm not saying that this is a good thing or that people should be relying on those machines. Those machines do not always produce accurate translations, but they do produce translations that sound good. Yeah, which is dangerous. The translations don't sound like garbage anymore, so companies are trusting them because they sound good, even if they're still incorrect and even if they've missed nuance, et cetera, et cetera. But it's good enough that companies and employers just don't care anymore. They're happy to not have to pay a real person because real people cost more money. And they're happy to just run it through a program. What is happening now in the translation industry is that translators are now being paid to fix machine translation work or to check machine translation work. But I can imagine it's not going to be long, but they're not, those jobs pay like garbage. Basically, if I were still doing translation work, I would be getting paid the same now as an experienced and skilled and talented translator as I was when I started as an ignorant baby translator back in 2003. The same. I would be getting not the same adjusting for inflation. I mean the same actual number, which means if you adjust for inflation, I'd be making way less than I was as a baby translator. It's just insulting. So yeah, I moved away from translation work entirely because I definitely wasn't going to earn less than I was making as a fresh graduate with my bachelor's degree. Christopher, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Where's everyone watching from today? Speaking of PhDs, I am actually going to be looking at getting my PhD in fashion history, finally actually codifying, making official everything I have already learned and researched and know, and getting a piece of paper to make it all official, which will also open doors to museum collections for me much more easily than I can access them now. So that's going to be a big shift for me, is getting my PhD in fashion history. I am probably going to write my dissertation on 16th century Korean fashion because that's where there's a lot of new research work to be done. A lot of new work, because all of the work that's been done thus far is very mechanical. People have the Korean researchers archaeologists mostly, have examined the garments that they excavate from all of these tombs, but they haven't actually looked at them from the perspective of how are they put together. Not, they've observed what the stitches are, they've observed the fabrics themselves, the thread count, they haven't actually seemed to have done much in the way of color analysis, in the terms of they haven't actually done samples looking for dye stuffs. So in many cases, we don't know what dye stuffs were actually used on some of these garments. But what no one seems to have done is examined these garments from the perspective of, why on earth did I start in the middle? From the perspective of which layer came first? Which two layers were sewn together first? In what way were they sewn together? What came next? What came after that? How was it then finished? So I'm going to be going and looking at extant 16th century Korean garments. I already started about a month ago. I got to touch my first 16th century Korean garments. Wow, what a spiritual moment that was. I've already started. I've got an appointment for another viewing at the National Folk Museum in Seoul, March 24th. And I think I have 3 garments. I hope I only have 3 garments selected there. I'm going to have to actually maybe reach out to the to the curator and find out, please tell me how many garments I requested, because if it was more than 3, we need to reconsider. We learned at the last viewing that there is absolutely a maximum number of garments that a person can reasonably examine in an hour, and 5 is too many. 5 is right out. 5 is way too many 16th century garments to look at with any kind of real attention to detail. So I'm hoping, it's been so long, we submitted our application to do this a month ago, and they're just now getting back to us. So I honestly don't remember how many garments I requested. I'll have to go back and double check. I have 2 hours. I should have 2 hours for this upcoming viewing. I'm hoping that the Folk Museum has its feces properly coagulated in such a way that it should be no problem for me to have the full 2 hours to examine. Some of you may know, on the last viewing I went to at the Daegu National Museum, it was a little strange. I love the Daegu National Museum. It's a fantastic little local museum, and they have an amazing collection of historical garments. The strange thing about it was that we showed up early. Dr. Kim Minji, my mentor, the woman I admire, the woman I want to be when I grow up. She and I showed up early to the museum. So we were there early for our appointment. We let them know we were there. They didn't come out until the appointment was supposed to start on the dot. They led us back through this, the labyrinth mazes and inner workings of the museum, always a fascinating thing to see. And then we get to this hallway, which is where we're going to do the viewing. It's just a hallway at the juncture of these various archives, the storerooms, basically these massive vaults where have all their collections stored. And nothing has been set up. They hadn't set up a single table for us. They hadn't set anything up yet. And so we're already eating into our hour and a half. It takes them 20 minutes to actually set up the tables before we can even look at the garments. And then it takes another 10 minutes to look through actually go get the rack with the garments that we had pre-selected and they had carefully laid out. So instead of having an hour and a half to look at 5 garments, we actually ended up with an hour to look at 5 garments. So I'm really desperately hoping, here's hoping, that at the National Folk Museum, we actually get 2 full hours to look at the garments and not an actual hour, because I really do want to take my time and examine every seam, think about how things are put together. Yeah, really, really excited by that prospect. So I really think if going for a PhD, I can bring a lot of new knowledge to the table about understanding 16th century Korean clothing. And also I'll be writing in English, and 99.9%, 0.999% of the literature available about historical Korean clothing is in Korean. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to bring that to everyone. Yep, it's very exciting. I just simply have to settle on a university at which to get my PhD. It will have to be one with an online program or a remote program anyway. It doesn't have to be online, but it will have to be remote so that I can, Skype in or Zoom in for lectures and whatnot if there are lectures, because unfortunately there are no real programs for that here in Korea. So fashion history is such a new field that there just aren't that many universities even offering that kind of course of study. Yeah. Oh, Gelbeline, watching from Oklahoma, very cool. Kati, you're in Atlanta, nice. I like Atlanta. It's got a fantastic food scene. It's got public transit. I mean, granted, Atlanta does have massive suburban sprawl, which I don't care for, but you know, like actual downtown Atlanta is I find very enjoyable. So yeah, so yes, I did used to be a translator. That is correct. That was my life before AI, before machines. For the machines ate my entire livelihood, basically. Okay, so seam is done. This is what's called a running back stitch. Right? And now I will be moving on to the other side. I just have to mark that also. That's the other thing when you're hand sewing, for those who aren't familiar with hand sewing and hand sewing techniques, when you are hand sewing, you will need to, it is advisable anyway, to mark your lines of stitching. When you're using a sewing machine, you have those guides on the machine, on the sewing machine plate under the needle plate. There are no guides when you're hand sewing, so you need to make your own guides. Yep. Does the Fashion Institute have a remote PhD program? I don't know if they do. Minji will be starting there shortly, and she was going to reach out to her colleagues when she's there and ask them about their recommendations. Because I don't think they have a PhD program, but we'll see. That they've hired her to teach a semester of fashion history is really remarkable, because fashion history is new as part of their program. The Fashion Institute, it's not the Fashion History Institute, it's the Fashion Institute. So they're focused more on the practical aspects of fashion, not necessarily on the academic side of fashion history. Tennessee, awesome. Kati, you're a suburban historian. Yeah, I mean, the reality is that most people live in the suburbs. It's you know, that's how America developed after basically Henry Ford dismantled all the public transit systems in the country and worked to develop those developments that are well away from the town, so that you'd have to drive to do things. Okay, so now I'm just going to go ahead and mark my seam for this next seam. Again, when you're hand sewing, you always want to mark so that you know where you're sewing. If you don't, I can show you what happens when you don't mark your seam, because I didn't on the first seam I did yesterday during our medieval live stream, because I was talking instead of paying attention to what I was doing. When you don't mark your seam, you end up with wonky stuff like this. See how not even that is? Happily, it doesn't really, on the outside, it doesn't show. So at least in this case, and that's one of the nice things about velvet, because velvet is three-dimensional, it will hide a variety of sins more than a fine silk or a fine thin fabric will. The thinner your fabric, the more likely it is to show any wobbles or unevenness in your seam, whereas thick fabrics can kind of, they just, like swollen tissue, they just kind of absorb the line of stitching, so that it just sort of automatically writes itself, looks more or less straight, much more straight than if it were a fine fabric. Reminds me of the Terminator movies. The machines are taking over. Skynet is AI. Yeah, you know, AI is dangerous because it is a tool that about which the majority of users have no real idea. They don't understand it. They don't understand how to use it. They don't understand how it works, especially when they're doing their searches. They don't understand that it is not objective, that it often invents information out of whole cloth. And people I mean, it was already bad enough when smartphones were invented. That was kind of the start of the end, because at that point, people no longer had to remember anything, right? They could just, once they had the internet in their phone, then they could look up anything they needed to know. There was no more onus to actually have to memorize anything or commit anything to memory. So now you have a phone that will tell you everything you need to know. I have 3 stepsons, some of you know. I love them dearly, like my own. My middle child said a couple of years ago, this has been a couple of years ago, he said to me, I don't need to learn anything that doesn't actually interest me, because if I need to know it in the moment, I can just look it up, and that's all I need. That is a terrifying thought, and I'm confident he is just spouting things he's heard other people say that I know other people have absolutely said and absolutely think. So the second we outsource our brains entirely, that's a dark age, ladies and gentlemen. So yeah, we're in the midst of a dark age. If we don't take drastic action to abort it, we will find ourselves in a very dark, maybe literally dark place, not even just metaphorically. And letting the machines start controlling things. Does no one read Ray Bradbury? Like, seriously, all of you who have not read Ray Bradbury, do yourself a solid. Go read his short stories. I'm thinking in particular, The Veldt. Who of you have read The Veldt? Anyone? Anyone? It's one of my favorite short stories ever, not because it is a fun read. I mean, it's a good read. He's an excellent writer. He was an excellent author. It does not have a happy ending. It has a cautionary ending, and I read that as part of when I was in my 6th grade literature class. We read The Veldt. So I have been wary of sentient technology since the age of 11, and all of us should be wary of sentient technology with good reason. But people aren't. So please go read The Veldt if you haven't. It's not a long story. It's short. It won't take long. All of the science fiction from that era is all about cautionary tales. It's all warnings about not rushing ahead rashly and entirely predicating our lives on high tech. And yet, no one seems to read cautionary science fiction anymore. What is that creature on the tapestry next to your head? This? Are you talking about this one? That's a fox. It's a fox. You see it's got pointed ears, a bushy tail. That's a fox. This is a lion, right? This is a lady. This is a lady, but that's a fox. I mean, 1984, reading 1984 is like reading current events, honestly. Yeah, 1984, everyone should absolutely read 1984, but no one has the attention. Here's the other problem. No one has the attention span anymore, or very few people have the attention span for long works anymore. So I would despair of convincing the average person to read 1984. The Veldt is a short story, though. And the Veldt is apolitical. So 1984 is very political. It's 100% political. Like, make no mistake. It's there in the current scheme of things. There are people who would never even read it because they would be offended by it, because they would automatically recognize certain trends in governments they may support, and then would therefore put it aside. The Veldt is apolitical. It's just about the technology. So yeah, definitely recommend the Veldt. It's suits all attention spans, and it makes its point pretty graphically. Yeah. Han, good morning. Did I 1984 political, never, right? Like, what am I talking about? I'm spouting nonsense as per usual. Whereas the Veldt is not. The Veldt is not. Yeah. And Ray Bradbury does not get enough credit, honestly. Excellent science fiction author, very wise. I wish we would just pay more attention to the lessons he had. My dad read me storybooks from the 60s that were cautionary tales when I was a kid as bedtime stories. Great dad. Love your dad. I'm sorry if that gave you bad dreams. But at least it may have instilled in you a level of caution that the average American or the average Westerner does not have, or the average human. It's not even a question of East or West. The average modern human might not have. Oh no, you haven't gotten to sleep yet, Han? I am sorry, my dear. You have an imbalance of your humors. Apparently, you are suffering from an excess of cold and damp. So too much phlegm, right? I think that's what they would say. You're suffering from an excess of phlegm. You need some more color. You need some more, what is it? Yellow bile? I'm trying to remember what they counter phlegm with. Maybe more blood. Maybe you need more blood. Yeah, right. I think it's blood, right? Blood is the hot one. You need more blood. So in other words, do not seek a phlebotomy. uh, Mom read whodunits. Yeah, I enjoy a good whodunit, I'll be honest. An excess of phlegm. The count is more blood. Yep, yep. I would never ever claim the expertise of a physician, but in my knowledge as a noblewoman, as I should have some basic knowledge of the principles of good physic, that is my understanding. Hey, it's a lot of spinach. It is it is funny how when the cures prescribed by medieval medicine actually end up being actually a good, or the treatments for according to medieval medicinal practice actually end up working pretty well, because it might not be for the right reason, the same reason, but a lot of those herbs and vegetables are really full of rich, powerful micronutrients that are antimicrobial, that will boost your immune system. So you actually end up getting a benefit from following some of those. Now, the second that they prescribe mercury or arsenic or lead or orpiment to balance your humors is the second you should walk away. Yeah, I love the work of science fiction author. I do not know that person, actually. Can you add artichokes to spinach? Yeah, absolutely. There's one of my favorite side dishes in the world is an artichoke spinach casserole, basically. Yeah, super yummy together. Very good combination. Oh wait, are you talking about my medieval theory? I'm not well versed enough to know if that is a proscribed or prescribed combination in medieval medicinal texts. So I could not actually tell you, to be fully honest. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but it's the usual thing of it's expensive, it must be good for you. Mercury was expensive. It was a luxury item, just like ground gemstones were expensive. It's a luxury item. Therefore, it must perforce be particularly beneficial for your health. If it's expensive, it's good for you. It's nice to know that some of the basic tenets of human civilization and human psychology perhaps have not changed. More expensive must equal more valuable. Of course, there's the debate about whether that's psychology or whether that's socialization based on our current, based on the idea of an economic system in which, profits and consumption matter. Which, by the way, does not make you capitalist. I get really frustrated. I'm only going to wander down this lane as it ties to medieval economics. I get very frustrated when people talk about capitalism like it's the only free market form of economics, or it's the only form of economics in which profit matters. And that's just not true. Literally, since we started trading, it was all about some kind of profit, right? About getting, amplifying the amount of what you have. Capitalism is a specific way of doing that. It's turning human labor into capital. It isn't just about profit and loss. The opposite of capitalism isn't actually communism, contrary to popular belief. Anyway, yeah. Medieval people were definitely big into profits, for certain. Let me see. What was Italian cuisine like before tomatoes? Oh, goodness. Yeah. Isn't that an interesting idea? Tomatoes. So Italian cuisine before tomatoes was, especially in the medieval era, going up to and including the Renaissance, lots of roasts, lots of sauces. There was a lot of pasta. The ravioli were still very much a thing in the Middle Ages, but the spices were much more interesting at the upper ends of society. At the lower ends of society, lots of garlic and onions and roasted and stewed meat, bread, pasta, like I said, was still very much a thing in Italy. Just for the most part, you can imagine the Italian dishes you know of and just subtract the tomatoes. And at the upper end, for the well-heeled, for people who could afford all those wonderful spices, then add cinnamon and cubebs and mace and cloves and grains of paradise and saffron and you'll get medieval cuisine, medieval Italian cuisine. And there are actually some, if you go to Italy, there are actually still to this day Italian dishes that do include spices like cinnamon and cloves, just not to the extent that they probably did in the Middle Ages. And I say probably because we actually aren't certain in most cases about quantity of spices in these recipes, because medieval recipes 99% of the time eschew any kind of useful measurement. They assume that you know the dish and you'll know how much spice to use. Whereas we don't know the dish because those dishes aren't made anymore, so we don't even have a base frame of reference for how it should taste, so we don't know how to adjust the spice. But that being said, medieval Italian food you still had all the pastas, you still had a lot of different kinds, almost every kind of pasta that I know of in Italy today, I think I have found a recipe for in 14th or 15th century Italian cookbooks. And ravioli, massively popular. Meat ravioli, cheese ravioli, herb ravioli, ravioli with eggs in them, like all kinds of ravioli. Massively, massively popular. Pasta, spaghetti, tagliatelle, vermicelli, all there. And they even have, what are the noodles called that have the hole in the center? It's like macaroni, but just like a straight tube. Bucatini. Yeah, I've seen 15th century instructions for how to make bucatini, for instance. Yeah. So, but I mean, it's not just Italian cuisine that was massively different right before the Columbian exchange. Imagine Asian cuisine, any cuisine in Asia with no peppers in it, no chili peppers, no bell peppers, no peppers whatsoever. Imagine Indian curry, no peppers, no tomatoes. That's where you really your mind kind of explodes a little bit, because most people couldn't imagine green Thai curry without enough heat to kill every bit of bacteria within a 10-mile radius, right? But green Thai curry, whatever the curry paste was that they were making in what we call the Middle Ages, it did not involve chili peppers at all. So yeah, it's really fascinating how those foodstuffs just completely came to dominate Eurasia. Potatoes, right? Imagine any given European cuisine without potatoes. Even in Italy, roasted potatoes are a standard side dish. No potatoes. No potatoes in Ireland, no potatoes in England, no potatoes in Spain, not France, not the Netherlands, not Sweden, not Norway, right? No potatoes. The starchy vegetable of choice would have been turnips or possibly rutabagas, depending on where you are, which are nowhere near as starchy as potatoes, and which also have a completely different texture from potatoes, and which are way more acrid and much more assertive than potatoes are. So yeah, those were the starchy vegetables of choice before potatoes. And here's the other thing. It's not like Columbus wreaked havoc in the Caribbean, tortured a bunch of people, brought some vegetables and stuff back, and those vegetables were instant hits in a European kitchen. No, it took, in many cases, a century or two for those new introductions to become regular staples in European kitchens. Potatoes, it wasn't until the 18th century that potatoes get mass adoption. Tomatoes, same thing, 18th century. Corn, same thing. Maize, what we call maize. Same thing. It was considered fodder for animals. It wasn't considered, I don't even think it was incorporated into European food at all until the Americans in the World War II brought it and introduced it. And there was all that World War II and post-World War II exchange of American cuisine. We were eating it in America because we picked up the way the Native Americans had been eating corn when we arrived. That's why they have Johnny cakes in Rhode Island. That's why they eat grits in the South. That's why in Mexico they have corn tortillas, right? That's because that's how maize was prepared and consumed in those places. But Europeans didn't pick that stuff up until the 20th century. So yeah, just imagine some of your favorite foods and then subtract potatoes, tomatoes, corn. Vanilla also comes from Mexico. Chocolate, obviously, comes from Mexico. So yeah, imagine cuisine without those staples in them, and you'll get a much closer imagining of what food was like. Because the base ingredients were basically the same across all levels. Where things varied was the ratio of meat that you ate and spices. Do androids dream electric sheep? Oh yeah, no, that's not Philip. I thought Do Androids Dream Electric Sheep was not Philip K. Dick. I thought that wasn't Asimov. I thought that was Asimov. Damn. You can tell I'm not as familiar with modern literature as I am with medieval. Makes sad puppy noise. There's an Indian restaurant down the street from my house. There's peppers in everything, which I'm allergic to. Yeah, so imagine, Captain, imagine Indian food with no peppers, no tomatoes. And in fact, I have a cookbook from the Mughal court from the 16th century. And the recipes, in many ways, they look just like the recipes we would recognize in modern curry, except no tomatoes, no peppers, no chili peppers. Yeah, much more mild. Kati, thank you for joining. Have a lovely evening. Tomorrow I'm doing a live stream much earlier with Philip from Irish Medieval History. We're going to be doing what life was like in France. And as always, I will be sewing on things at the same time. So yeah, gosh, I thought it was Asimov who wrote that story. Yep, completely. Like I said, you can tell I'm not as up to date on modern literature as I am on historical 19th century and earlier. Yeah, I mean, fish sauce and herb sauce, yeah, all part of, so fish sauce was, I learned something very interesting. I know, Twitch, you probably heard this already, but I'll share it again because it's just that fascinating. I learned something very interesting about fish sauce, fermented fish sauce. So the reason that I often wondered, why is there fermented fish sauce as the primary condiment base flavor giver, the umami giver in Southern Asia and not in Northern Asia? And the reason is Buddhism. So as Buddhism spread, it spread with it, and especially in its earlier days, its stringent tenets about vegetarianism. But that included fermented shrimp paste, primary flavor giver, that included fish sauce. And so people who adopted Buddhism had to develop different ways of conveying umami to their food, and they turned to soy. And so tofu was invented, and soy sauce is part of that process. So that's why in much of China, not all, but much of modern day China, Japan, Korea, soy sauce is the flavor giver, the umami flavor giver of choice instead of fish sauce, because those were places where Buddhism took real hold early on by the 7th century and completely changed the cuisine, because before that they did have fish sauce. How fascinating is that? So can you imagine Korean cuisine, Japanese cuisine, so many dishes in China would be so different if instead of soy sauce, they were using fish sauce. Yeah, it's fascinating how a movement like that is ostensibly a spiritual movement, can have such far-reaching and profound impacts on the material culture as well. Sorry, I was about to do some let me see. Yeah, like I said, I'm not as well versed in 20th century literature as I am in 19th century and earlier, mostly because until recently, I didn't really care much about the 20th century. I mean, yeah, it wasn't interesting to me. It's only become interesting to me for very pragmatic reasons now, because I need to understand why we're in the mess we are, and you need to understand the 20th century for that. Yeah. Let me see. I need a medieval cookbook. Yes, I have a plethora of medieval cookbooks. For Captain, I don't know, have you seen my live medieval cooking show? I didn't do it last week, and I'm going to try to get it in this week. I do a live stream medieval cooking show where we work through a recipe together, and I talk about the various medieval sources. One that I can absolutely recommend, and it's here. I'm not going away. I'm just reaching. I'm still here, everyone. Don't go away. Don't go away. Okay. This one, for if you are a beginner in medieval cuisine and you really want something that will let you start cooking medieval food instead of having to work from scratch, redacting recipes yourself and translating recipes yourself, I can highly recommend The Medieval Kitchen: Recipes from France and Italy, because they provide you with a translation of the original recipe, and then they provide you with their interpretation and an actual recipe that you can then just make with measurements and everything. The introductory chapters are very illuminating and provide lots of excellent information, providing context. So yeah, I absolutely highly recommend this book, The Medieval Kitchen: Recipes from France and Italy. Definite must-have if you're interested in getting into medieval cooking. And the good thing about it is they cite each of the recipes. And so if you're interested, if you find yourself liking recipes from a particular source, you can look up which source that is, and they'll provide you with resources on where to actually find just that source, right? They've got a fantastic, works cited, recipes by manuscript source in the index in the back. They've got, extensive works cited, as I said. Yeah, so I can absolutely 100% recommend, if you're interested in medieval cuisine and actually doing it for yourself, The Medieval Kitchen: Recipes from France and Italy. No, they are not a channel sponsor. I just like to share good books. Will we have any Mughal dishes in the cooking blog? Yes, I have had to. The reason we haven't done any Mughal dishes yet in the cooking blog is because I've had to order some ingredients that are not available locally. So I've had to import barberries because barberries feature really heavily in Mughal cuisine. So we will be having some Mughal dishes. We'll be having some 16th century Persian dishes. Yeah, we're going to be expanding. We're definitely going to be expanding our cuisine, the range of our historical cuisine. Which actually, how do hairstyles different from then and now? Men, okay, so let's talk about women. One of the big differences is that women basically, in general, all of medieval Europe actually, let their hair just grow until it reached its maximum length. They didn't cut it into shapes and styles like we would understand until you get into the 15th century in Italy, and then somewhere in about the middle of the 15th century, and I haven't traced who was the first to do this, but someone actually trims their fringe so that their fringe is not just as long as their hair, so that they actually have fringe. Their fringe, what some of you might call bangs, only comes to about chin level, a little bit longer, but mostly to chin level. So they actually take this front part of their hair and they cut that short, but the rest of it grows super long. And then they end up curling the fringe to make it really adorable and shapely around the face. But that only comes about in like the middle of the 15th century in Italy, and not everyone adopts that. Slowly, though, that starts spreading. Actually, having bangs becomes sometimes fashionable. That's past the Middle Ages. In the medieval period, for women, for the most part, their hair was, was coiffed, it was coiffed into a bun or put in braids and pinned to the head and then covered in some way by a headdress. So that's really different. That's a big difference, is that, up until you get to about in the 15th century in Italy, everywhere in Europe, it seems to be that you either have your hair in braids or in a bun and you cover your hair. Now, there's some debate about whether in the Norse society, for instance, whether the Norse women actually styled their hair in complex braids. There's just not enough visual evidence to really make good conclusions about that. And the visual evidence that we have often depicts goddesses. And so it's really, I wouldn't necessarily say that the way a goddess is depicted is the way a normal woman would have done her hair, for instance. So yeah, one of the big differences I would say, though, is that for the most part, it's not a question of hairstyles, but head coverings and headdresses. So that's a big thing, that women just let their hair grow until it just didn't grow anymore. And two, that it was mostly about coiffing the hair, braiding it or pinning it up so that it was out of the way and could be worn under a headdress. That's broad sweeping general strokes, right? When you have really long hair, then you can do things like elaborate braids and elaborate braiding configurations, but no matter what, the tendency all throughout medieval Europe was for women to cover their hair in stylish layers of headdresses. And that has a practical reason and it has an aesthetic reason. For men actually, interestingly, are the ones who have hairstyles because they're not always covering their hair entirely. They're often just wearing caps or hats. And so the rest of their hair is visible. So, you can men are the peacocks. Men tend to be the one who go through there's phases of, what's considered fashionable facial hair, whether hair should be short, whether it should be long to the chin, whether it should be shaved in the back and then you just have a blade of hair in the front, right? Men go through this whole period of different kinds of hairstyles, from the end of the 11th century to the 15th, 16th century. It's men. Men are the ones who have all these hairstyles because they're not letting their hair just grow. Even though, God, how many movies have you seen? How many television shows have you seen where the men are depicted with like wild hair? The medieval men just have long hair. It's just, we don't have much evidence of just long hair. For men. What we have is hair. Often you can see hair that's like down to the chin for men, or sometimes it gets down to the shoulders, but then it's curled and it's combed very nicely and it's oiled so that it's shiny. And yeah. So yeah, for men, I think one of the big differences is that very often men in the Middle Ages had longer hair, just as a general rule, depending, it goes through cycles and fashions, but very often longer hair is fashionable, but men actually do go through styles, the bowl cut, what we call the page boy cut, right? There's all these different cuts that men are going through when women are just kind of letting their hair grow long and then braiding it or pinning it in a bun and covering it in some kind of really cool headdress. Again, your mileage is going to vary. The 1,000 years that is the Middle Ages is not a monolith. Different cultures, different geographical areas are going to have a different approach to all of this, but that's broad strokes, right? Broad sweeping strokes. What are barberries? Barberries are delicious. Barberries are these little red berries. They're sweet and tart, but mostly tart. And they add color and flavor to dishes. So it's kind of like, it doesn't have the same flavor profile as cranberry, but it's tart like a cranberry. It's a little bit sweeter than a cranberry though. Cranberries are not very sweet at all. They're just tart and sour. Barberries are tart, sour, and sweet. Yeah, they're super yummy. Love barberries. Oh goodness, have I fallen way behind in the chat? Sorry. Let me take a moment to just stream through the chat, everyone. Let me see. As I understand it, the economy was pursued like we had infinite resources, and the environmental movement changed that. Yeah, for certain. My grandmother, long braids, wearing a scarf. Yeah, it's a thing, right? It's very practical. Question: did men ever have the mullet hairstyle, short at the front, long in the back? Yes, and in Ireland, it was called the Culan, actually, but not for all of Irish history. No, it's not like the Irish men were always wearing the Culan. There's a specific period where the Culan seems to be in fashion, and I've seen a depiction. Yeah, the Culan. It was in Ireland that I know for a fact. Men, end of the first millennium into the 13th century, I think, is kind of when we have evidence of Irishmen having the mullet. It's called the Culan. I have not offhand seen any evidence of that in other places in Europe, but I haven't necessarily looked in depth at men's hairstyles through all of Europe and all the Middle Ages to be able to say that for certain. So I'll speak in the positive. In the positive, I know for certain that the Irish wore what we would call a mullet, which was called a culan in that era, but it's not for the entire Middle Ages. It's in parts of the medieval period in Ireland. And I don't even think it was necessarily consistent. I think it went in and out of fashion too. I haven't any hair above the ear. Well, then a good shaved head is a fine thing, sir. Yeah, beards or beardless is a constant back and forth. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I was wondering if there are any medieval songs or poems that survived into any modern oral traditions. I think the earliest side I have memorized is Trees Do Grow High. Panko breadcrumbs. Not necessarily that songs that have survived in the modern tradition, but songs have survived from the Middle Ages in written form with music. So we have lots of songs from the Middle Ages, actually, in a variety of languages with music. So yes, if they've survived into the oral tradition, no, but they've been documented in writing. Does that count? Lots of medieval music has survived, surprisingly. And medieval songs also. even medieval English songs. So that we have a lot of 15th century songs in English, actually. So yeah, lots of songs have survived. There is a website. Look up medieval music. It's a site managed by a friend of mine. If you look up SCA, S as in snakes, C as in cat, A as in apple, SCA music, then it should bring you to the website. A whole bunch of resources on medieval music and songs. Poems too. Lots of poems have survived. Lots of poems have survived from the Middle Ages in writing, in original documents from that era. Let me see. Christina is very lucky to have you in our timeline. Thank you. Christina, thank you for that lovely compliment. That's really lovely to hear. So what I was just doing while I was holding forth answering your very excellent questions, I was putting in what are called easing cuts. So this is what it looked like before. So no cuts in the seam. But because it's curved in like this, if I do not put in these easing cuts, I'll show you what happens. So you see these wrinkles here? That's because it's pulling against itself and it can't actually flex out, because without these easing cuts, it won't flex. But now, see, look, now it can flex and bend in the other direction. And so now it will lay nice and flat. Let me show you. So now, silk pile fluffing everywhere, right? Okay. And now, see, no more wrinkles. Now it actually sits nicely against my wrist like that. So those are easing cuts, and you nearly always have to do that unless your fabric is somehow more flexible than this is. You'll always have to put that in anytime you have a curved seam like this, if you're turning it in the other direction. Were there bald men in medieval times? Yes, there were 100% bald men in medieval times. No. There were bald men. The same issues we have with hair now. They had receding hairlines, thinning hair. It was all absolutely a problem. And we know this because we have health manuals that provide recipes for concoctions that should hypothetically make your hair regrow. But just like now, it's all snake oil. I don't think any of these concoctions actually worked. And some of them have extremely toxic chemicals, so no one should try, actually. But yeah, they suffered from the exact same hair issues that we do: hair loss, thinning, receding hairlines, whole 9 yards. It was all an issue, So if you suffer from alopecia or any form of baldness, receding hairline, you are having an experience that men seem to have had forever, as far as we can tell. Yeah. And of course, yeah, from a choice, if you're choosing to be bald, the tonsure, which is literally where you shave or pluck your hair, the crown of your head, and just leave a little bit of hair, kind of the ring of hair all the way around. If you think of any depiction of Friar Tuck from Robin Hood, right, that's a tonsure. But now, was it ever chosen as a fashion choice? I don't have evidence of bald as a fashion choice that I can think of. I haven't seen any evidence of bald as a fashion choice, as a choice for a sign of religious devotion, or sometimes if you got lice, they would shave your head if you couldn't get rid of the infestation. For sometimes if you got a certain infection, they might shave your head as well. But as a fashion choice, not so much. As a consequence of just being human, absolutely. Let me see. Yeah. So Twitchy, sorry, I'm just now seeing your comments. Oh, let me see. Were there bald young men? Yeah. Okay. Got that. The hormone that causes baldness apparently indicates a high fertility. Yeah. It's one of those ironies, isn't it? Yeah. It is interesting. We actually have plenty. We have portraits of men from the 15th century who are bald, who have like peach fuzz. So 100% a real thing, but definitely not something that I've ever encountered as being referenced as being a fashion choice, shall we say. There's the suggestion that the bowl cut was actually an echo of the tonsure. Oh, that's an interesting theory. Is that just someone looking at it and saying this would make sense if it is, or is there some contemporary reference you know, likening the two. You know, the the bowl cut I've always looked at as a very practical sort of cut, because you can literally put a bowl on the person's head and just cut all the way around and shave up to the bowl, right? So I've always thought the bowl cut was really just a pragmatic approach to hair maintenance, especially on campaign. If any one of you were wondering what the bowl cut is, Henry V, the king, right? That was called the king, I think, right? He is, I'm pretty certain, if I recall correctly, he has a species of bowl cut. I actually have friends who, when they go to Penzic, that big 2-week medieval recreation fair I've mentioned, they actually get a bowl cut for the duration. They don't necessarily wear their hair in a bowl cut the rest of the year, but they do during that time, just so they can have that authentic feel. Yep. I rocked the bowl cut as a preteen. Super cool shellback bow. Yeah, it is funny how the bowl cut has occasionally come back into fashion. But in the 15th century, it was a warrior's haircut, right? It's how the knights did their hair, which, you know, kind of sometimes that will baffle some people who might have certain preconceived notions about the bowl cut. In the, you know, by the time I was in school, it was definitely, by the early aughts anyway, it was kind of being regarded as the geek haircut, no longer fashionable. Yeah. It was the analysis of effigy tombs that disappears so frequently when not with a helmet. Oh, interesting. Do you remember what website for the medieval songs was? It was pulling up a lot of unrelated stuff. Do SCA music, SCA and music in quotes, and see what that pulls up. I think it's under a different domain now, so it wasn't an easy to remember domain. So I actually don't know the site offhand, and I don't have the ability to look for it right now. I don't know if Ryan is watching, and then he could look up the SCA music website. But yeah, there are a lot of really good online resources out there for medieval music and song. Now, what I'm going to warn people that actual medieval music and actual medieval song is nothing like folk songs now. Nothing like folk songs now. It's much more complicated. It's much more, there's tempo changes and there's key changes, and there's lots of half phrases, and it doesn't follow generally, or very rarely does it follow a verse and chorus, a verse and refrain format. So medieval songs feel very different from modern folk songs. And that surprises a lot of people, because they assume that folk songs are just the descendants of medieval music, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Most so-called folk songs now were like popular tunes in the 19th century. What we call folk songs were once pop tunes, basically. But the medieval pop tunes, for the most part, haven't really survived in their medieval state, because that style of music and vocalization fell out of fashion in about the 16th century, actually. Sorry, handsome. I forgot to tell you I was starting. I hoped you would get the notification. I know, naive of me, right? Yeah, Kenneth Branagh in Henry V definitely had a bowl cut, 100%. Medieval and Renaissance music. Yep, there you go. Medieval and Renaissance music, SCA, Society for Creative Anachronism. That's it. Thank you, thank you, Faye. Appreciate that. Oh wait, Faye or Faya? Is it Faye or Faya? Let me know. I'm so sorry if I've been mispronouncing your name. Really apologize for that. Forgive me for being quiet. I'm also sewing. Twitchy, how dare you sew while I'm sewing? How could you? How can you, in my sewing party, you're doing the thing I'm doing? Tisk, tisk, tisk. Yeah, I love medieval music because it's so interesting. I really love medieval Andalusian music, especially music from, from the Moorish courts, but even the music from the court of Alfonso el Sabio, the king of Castilla in the 13th century. His cantigas de Santa Maria are fascinating. The lyrics are funny, and the vocalizations are the music, the style of notation of the musicality is so interesting. You can definitely hear the influence from the Maghreb and even from Syria and Damascus in the style of songs that are being sung, that were being sung in the court of Alfonso el Sabio. So yeah, I love the Candidas de Santa Maria. So wonderful. And some of those stories are as far from being sacred and high-minded as you can imagine. Look up the I forget, is it Cantiga number 1? Is that the one that's about the pork chop? The dancing pork chop? Yes, you heard me right. The dancing pork chop. The miracle of the dancing pork chop. Who doesn't want a song that is about a miracle involving the Virgin Mary and a dancing pork chop? It doesn't get better than that, folks. That is peak life right there. Let me see. I'm adjusting my LARP scapular. Very cool. Hand whipping the new edge. It's a rough weave twill. Oh, if it's a twill weave wool, then it's probably not fulled, right? So you actually have to have those edges caught up or they'll ravel. Yeah. Yeah, I love twills. They're beautiful, but the edges generally do need to be finished if they haven't been fulled, which usually they haven't. Why are you on the subway? Where did you go? You were supposed to just go to the gaming session, not on the subway. What the hell did you go? Yeah, look up Cantiga de Santa Maria pork chop and you'll find it. That should bring it up. There should be no issues with that. What about the song about the lobster? Yeah, there's actually a couple of, now that I think about it, there's a couple of different songs about pork chops. There's a lot of food related songs in the cantigas. Food is important, okay? Food is important, everyone. Yeah. Yes, as my condottiero says, don't forget to like and subscribe, everyone. So yeah, the basic gist of the Cantiga de Santa Maria about the pork chop is there's a tavern employee, a waitress as we might call her. You know, she gets hungry, so she steals one of her patrons' pork chops and hides it for later, and claims that it's been lost. And yeah, basically the Virgin Mary reveals the pork chop and it dances, and it's fun. It's super fun. So the Middle Ages had a dancing pork chop, and today we have Veggie Tales. Yeah, you can tell which food group was more important, right? which food group was more prestigious in the Middle Ages. Oh yeah, the cantigas are a lot of fun. They really are. You hear a title like the Cantigas de Santa Maria, and you imagine that it's just going to be song after song revering the Virgin and how gracious she is and merciful she is and how wonderful she is and how what a fantastic example of motherhood and how she has redeemed us by bearing the Son of God, etc., etc. No, I bring you dancing pork chops. Yeah, Mary being a trickster is really a lovely change, isn't it? You're so right. You are so right, Han, 100%. Oh my goodness, where are my pins? I lost my pin case. No. Darn it. Well, I guess I'll just do one side at a time then. So now what I'm doing is putting in a hem. I'm doing a single hem because this is velvet and it's super thick. I'm putting in a single hem at the top of the cuff here, and because it flares out, you can see I have to do little micro tucks along the way to just kind of gather that in so that it actually all turns back nicely and fits. And as you see, it will look very nice on this side. Now, again, I'm to the point of deciding whether I'm almost at the point of deciding after I finish this with whip stitches. I will be at the point of deciding if I want to cover up the edge here with a strip of facing. The reason I'm leaning away from doing that more and more, even though it will make it nice and finished, A, it's going to be on the inside, covered up by the sleeve entirely, and B, this is already really thick. So adding another layer of fabric, and the sleeve itself is also wool lined in silk, and then I also have a turned back edge there. So I don't think I want yet another, I don't want 5 layers of fabric all basically in the same spot on just one of the garments, because I'm already going to have also under that the smock. So I think I'm going to eschew the extra finishing step of applying a facing here on the inside. Yeah. 1, it's unnecessary. And 2, I think it will just be uncomfortable to have one more layer of fabric there. Let's see, it's a tough twill linen for the inner coat because I'm still of the opinion that linen coats were a thing. Twitchy, no criticism from me on that score. I will not, that is a hill on which I will not die. I just won't. Yeah, I will not die on that hill. There are, for those of you who are wondering to what my dearest Han is referring, to what Twitchy is referring, there is a, it is a hot topic in the reenactment and living history community, whether linen was only used for the undergarments, the most undergarments, the small clothes, the layers against your skin and for head coverings like this, or whether it was also used for the next underlayer, the curdle or the coat, as it was called in the 14th century, right? So there's a very strong belief in the living history community and the fashion history community that this layer, the curdle, was either made of silk or wool, but never of linen. And that's based on, you can't really prove a negative, but what you can refer to is where the evidence points you. So the preponderance of evidence points towards curdles and coats, C-O-T-E, being manufactured of silk or wool. There are very, 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 very few references to them being made of linen. So because of that, people say, well, we have no evidence of it, therefore it wasn't done. You know, take with that what you will. So there are some people some reenactors who become very emotional about other reenactors having linen coats or linen curdles. I have a linen curdle. I have 2 linen curdles, in fact. So yeah, I'm of the side that I bet it probably there's a possibility it could have been done. But also these our medieval forebears in Europe did not live in humid places that were hot and humid. They didn't. Not like some of the places where many of us do medieval living history, like Alabama, like Georgia, like Louisiana, Mississippi, or I don't know, Australia, Thailand, right? Those places are hot and humid. And so if, you know, silk is, it's a breathable fabric, wool is a breathable fabric, but silk is a good insulator. It is not a good summer fabric. Wool is actually better at heat and humidity than silk is, believe it or not. So, but that being said, linen is superior in every way. So if your top layer is going to be wool or silk, and you're in these extremely hot and humid tropical climates, you know, linen for the win, man, even if it's not necessarily documentable. It's not a hill on which I'm willing to die. It just isn't. And, you know, here's the thing. In a lot of cases, there are many aspects of medieval fashion where the common wisdom says that that is not done, that did not exist. And then eventually we find evidence that it did. So it wouldn't surprise me if we start encountering more evidence as more resources are digitized, as more things are discovered that point towards, say, linen being used for the intermediate layer. For instance, the common knowledge used to be that hosen, joined hosen, were never made of linen, and yet there's an extant pair from 1500 of hosen, men's hosen, that are made from linen, entirely of linen, right? Common knowledge. Kirtles were never made from linen, and yet in 1550 we have an extant kirtle in Italy that is made of not just linen, blue linen, dyed linen twill. Actually, it's got a herringbone pattern if I recall correctly. So yeah, there could be a dozen reasons why it's not documented clearly. It could be, you know, here's the other thing. There are expense accounts where a garment like a kirtle is described, and they actually don't describe the fiber out of which it's made. They describe the color. So for instance, in the expense accounts of Queen Margaret of Denmark, well, Margaret of Denmark, Queen of Scotland, from about 1473-ish. She has several curdles, many curdles that are mentioned actually, and many of them are just described by color. The fabric is not detailed. It doesn't say whether it's linen or wool or silk. And that's true of a lot of these coats, where they often don't describe the actual fiber of the fabric. They describe the color. So it could be that in those cases, they're referring to linen. They just decided it wasn't worth mentioning that it was linen, right? So yeah, that's the brief spiel about whether a curdle or a coat, C-O-T-E, should or could be linen or not. Let me see. Also, a linen coat is far more easily recycled than wool, which you can repair more effectively. Yep, 100%. Wait, my volume went away? Did my volume go away? Did my volume go away? Okay, hold on a minute. Have you ever tried baking the first recorded recipes for cake? What are the, okay, so what do you mean by recorded recipes? So actually, yes, so Ani, if you could just explain to which reference you're recording, and when you say a recipe for cake, what you mean? Because the word cake doesn't mean cake like most people understand it. So yeah, and what do you mean by the first recorded recipes? Because we keep finding earlier and earlier recorded recipes for things like that when people start looking through cuneiform clay scrolls or clay tablets and whatnot. Yeah. Question, how would bodily oils be washed from silk after use? The bodily oils would not be washed out of silk because everyone, ladies and gentlemen, in medieval fashion, medieval Europe, all across medieval Europe, the entirety of medieval Europe, all the way up until very recently, Europeans wore a linen, or later, much later, but in the Middle Ages, linen layer against your skin. The smock, the chemise, the camicia, the camisa, the shirt, right? You wore this against your skin. Notice how this garment is not coming in contact with my skin. This layer and the layer that will go over it will not come in contact with my skin. They will be protected from my skin in all places by this linen layer. So linen, silk, they didn't have to worry about getting bodily oils out of silk for the most part. That being said, we have multiple manuscripts from the Middle Ages from Europe that actually provide tips and tricks for getting all manner of stains out of silk and wool and even linen. And so there's different ways for getting oils out. It depends on the kind of oil. One of the big ways to get oil out was to use some kind of powder to actually soak it out. In some cases, bran, interestingly, I haven't actually tried this myself, but I'm kind of curious to do so, to actually try grinding bran and then gently rubbing the bran into the oil stain. And then the bran is supposed to absorb the oil out, for instance. Chalk is another method that is recommended, and I have used chalk, and that does work. You actually rub the chalk into the fabric, let it soak, and then you brush it off because the chalk draws the oil out. Right. So yeah, there were ways to get oil stains out of fabric in the Middle Ages. Interestingly, soap is not one of the ones that's mentioned. But yeah, silk garments would not have been laundered like we understand it in wet. They would not have been wet laundered. They were dry cleaned. They were spot treated and dry cleaned, basically. But that's because the silk would not have been against your skin. The linen is against your skin. Let me see. Shellbackbow says we have daily extreme low humidity warnings this winter. Humidity is in the 40%. Yeah, Shellbackbow, we've got drier warnings all the time. I have 2 humidifiers in my apartment. But then the summer comes and we're fighting the humidity and preventing black mold, right? Let me see. Oh, Ryan turned his volume back on. Oh, okay, got it. Let me see. My argument is tenuous, Twitchy says, or because there's a document from 1400s Venice talking about how a convent wardrobe mistress had to allocate clothing according to a nun's need and weather demands. Well, it's a reasonable argument. This at least suggests a difference between summer and winter. Yep, 100%. How did Shellbackbow? I love you, Shellbackbow. You're awesome. How did they get canola or Crisco out? Love you, man. Love you. Chef's kiss. Fantastic. In case any of you are wondering, canola oil is rapeseed oil. God, I hope my channel doesn't get demonetized for that. And didn't exist in the Middle Ages, as far as I have no evidence of rapeseed oil anyway in any of the documents I've read being used for cooking. Crisco is an abomination and should be banned from the planet. Oregano oil kills mold. Was this used in the Middle Ages? Oregano oil is an essential oil, right? So they didn't have essential oils in medieval Europe because that requires distillation, and distillation is a relatively new technology, and it doesn't get to Europe until the later Middle Ages, and it's usually mostly used for alchemy. So I'm not really familiar with essential oils don't really seem to be much of a thing as far as I can tell. So but herbs, so mold, how was mold contended with? I'm trying to think. I haven't seen any manuscripts that describe how to treat or fight mold, but I do know that things, tools, implements, kitchen implements, for instance, salt was used heavily, salt and UV light. So to wash things, they would scrub it in salt, not the expensive salt, like the cheap, crappy gray salt that you could get from boiling brackish water, right? They would scrub it in salt and then they would put it in the sunlight and let the sunlight do its thing. So that seems to be how mold was fought on objects where that was feasible. If you're talking about mold on walls, I don't know if this was such an issue in medieval homes because they didn't have as much stuff as we do. My observation is that when you have a lot of stuff, it leads to dark, dank corners where mold can grow. If you don't have an excess of belongings and your walls are generally exposed, then you don't have as much of an issue with that. They had cold pressed oils, but so expensive. Oh yeah, 100%. But I don't think oregano can be made with I don't think you can cold press oregano oil, because I'm pretty certain oregano oil is an essential oil. So it's achieved through distillation. So I don't think oregano oil falls in that category. But yeah, I mean, so you had walnut oil, you had olive oil. I think I've read about hazelnut oil. Other oils that are mentioned in the archaeological record and or medieval documents. Lard, was lard and tallow and rendered fat of all kind was definitely highly used for cooking and also for moisturizers. In fact, a lot of skincare products used animal fats, which, if you know anything about the fatty acid profile of animal fats, it's actually much more absorbable by our skin than plant fats are generally. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think that oregano could be. I didn't think it was a cold press oil. I don't know. Maybe you could get the oregano seeds and try to press an oil out of it. No, but I think they're referring to oregano oil now as essential oil. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I need to find my thread. My thread has. I thought I had everything lined up here, and apparently I don't. Gosh darn it. Where's my sewing box? Aha. Thread. So just for those who haven't seen this trick before, so this is a medieval spool. It's a medieval thread winder, right? Spool for thread, for winding your thread, for storing your thread. One of the ways in which thread was stored in the Middle Ages, based on an extant find. And so this one's out of thread at the moment. But one of the things that these thread winders lack, curiously, is a way to actually notch the thread so that it doesn't unwind on its own. Modern threads of spool have that little notch in the top or the bottom of the spool where you use it to lock the tail of the thread in place so it doesn't unwind. I've never seen evidence of such a thing on any of the extant medieval spools that I've seen. So what I do is I take a nice broad piece of finger loop braiding like this, a lace as it was called in the 15th century in English, and then I just take my thread winder like this, make sure that the tail of thread is caught up, and then I just wrap it. I mummify it basically in this nice big broad piece, this big broad lace, and now the thread will not come unwound, and when I travel with it, the thread on the spool is also protected from wear and tear. Again, this is a problem that medieval sewists probably never had because they probably never took their sewing with them for the most part. It was something they would do in a workshop and in the same place. But as a modern contessa, I travel with my sewing a lot. So I need to have solutions for these problems and I try to, use when I devise these solutions, I try as much as possible to use things that would have been available in the Middle Ages anyway. And God knows they definitely had the ability to make lovely laces like this. And probably just like me, the people starting and learning new laces would probably make little mistakes. And so this one, for instance, has, oh, not as many mistakes as I thought it would. Okay, it's got one tiny flaw. But this is one of the things I do with my samples, my practice pieces, when I'm learning new laces, new finger loop braids. I keep all of these samples and I find uses like protecting and securing my thread. That way I have a use for the thing that I've used to become better at doing the thing. Let me see. What about threading the lace through the holes on the spool to secure them? I've tried that, Takeda. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It works in the short term, but if I engage in what I call extreme travel, which is almost the only way in which I travel, eventually it comes unwound. Yeah, I've tried poking it through that hole, winding it around and around and around. It eventually works its way out. It's possessed. It's like it has a mind of its own. He's talking about these holes here, right? I've tried that and it doesn't stay. Possibly because it's silk thread and it's slippery, right? It doesn't have a lot of grip. Yeah. So Faye, a slit in the wood. So here's the thing. I don't know if they would be able to make a slit in the wood fine enough that would actually secure the thread. But the thing is that the ones we have don't have that. They don't have a slit in the wood to secure it. So it's, this is a replica of the originals, and the originals we have do not have that slit like the modern ones have. So, but the other thing I like about this technique is that it cocoons this spool and it prevents it from being roughed up during the transport, because this is silk thread. You want it to keep its shine. You don't want it to be fuzzed out and frayed. So by wrapping it entirely in this finger loop braid, it keeps that from happening. Yeah, silk is a demon with a mind of its own. 100%. Yep, agree with that assessment. Absolutely. Speaking of wax, should always wax your thread when you're hand sewing. For those of you who are just entering the world of hand sewing, this is how you want to go about it. You definitely want wax. Beeswax. Paraffin will not work. A vegetable wax, I haven't tried it, so I can't speak to that, but paraffin will not work. It will not. So when you're using beeswax, you might need to warm it up in your hand, make it a little softer, and then you just pull your thread through it from the center out. Do not pull from the needle. If you pull from the needle, you will snap your needle. Ask me how I know. I love beeswax. It smells so nice. Does anyone else like sniffing their beeswax? I have a beeswax problem, apparently. Okay, so now I'm about to use my favorite stitch of all time, the whip stitch. Everyone loves a good whip stitch, right? Okay. Yeah, the whip stitch is, it is a universal stitch too. Studying the 16th century Korean clothes that I have, whip stitch for the win, baby. They have all the stitches that are present in 16th century European clothing. They're using in 16th century Korea as well. It's, I wasn't expecting to discover some kind of fancy new stitch, but even still, it's nice to see that similarity, what the heck? Okay. It's really nice to see those similarities. Whip stitches, back stitch, running back stitch, running stitch, blind stitch, all present and accounted for. So yeah, that was a very interesting, very gratifying discovery. I love finding these ways in which, cultures are connected. It's part of the joy of studying history for me, is finding these connections, of reminding myself and others that we are not alone. Oh my gosh, I got way further. What the heck? Yeah. I love the smell of beeswax. Yeah, it is. Beeswax for the win. Beeswax candles, so nice. So nice. But for everyone's edification, beeswax in the Middle Ages was considered a luxury good. It was not a cheap item. Not everyone could keep bees. Not everyone did keep bees. Bees were not farmed at the industrial level at which we're trying to farm them now. So beeswax candles, for instance, were absolutely a luxury item. Very few people got to have beeswax candles for lighting. Many people use them only for very special occasions. I'm not talking about the aristocracy. I'm, referring to the 90% of Europe's population. For lighting, they would use oil lamps. They would use tallow often as for in their oil lamps. So, and in medieval sources, they don't necessarily distinguish. They often don't distinguish. Like for them, tallow and lard are also oil. They're a kind of oil. They don't make the distinction that we do now between oil and tallow and lard. Like that's, to them, it's all oil, all oil. And they would use tapers, right? Not tapers. Gosh darn it. Rushlights. Rushlights. Tapers are candles. They would use rushlights, which are the core. And I want to make some rushlights after when we get reeds back in season here. Are made from the core of a reed, which is basically like a sponge string. And you actually soak the core, you strip the core of the reed out of the reed, and you soak it in lard or tallow. And then there's a special holder, a rushlight holder, and you light that, and that is your source of light. They're much dimmer than beeswax candles. They smell meaty. And they sputter. So it's definitely not the same kind of pleasant, heavenly smell of beeswax candles. I don't know about you all, but for me, beeswax is especially associated with the smell of mass, right? Because growing up Catholic, being Catholic, beeswax candles are often used for a variety of vigils and church masses. So, the smell of beeswax almost has a holy smell to me, whereas the smell of a rushlight being meaty and beef-like, not so much. Oh, Takeda, are you back? Did it finally work? I mean, what? I don't know what happened. YouTube has been doing weird things lately, everyone. It's been banning people, blocking people without any of us creators being able to have any influence on who is being banned or blocked. Philip and I have been scratching our heads and trying to figure out exactly what is going on, and it's just been very frustrating in general, I will say. Okay, Susan, see you tomorrow. Tomorrow at 11, I'll be back on 11 a.m. Asia time. That will be 9 p.m. New York City time and everything in between. I'll be back on with Philip from Irish Medieval History. We will be talking about daily life in medieval France. And of course, I will be sewing as always. So I hope to see many of you there. Feel free to come with your questions, bring your own knowledge and experience, just chat and be social if you want to. Yep. Do I distinguish the difference between Vatican and my faith? Catholic. I mean, I'm Roman Catholic, so the Vatican is kind of the head of my faith. So no, I do not, I guess. By definition, I can't distinguish between the Vatican and my faith. Oh, Takeda, I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on. It's very strange.
What's happening?
YouTube is, blocking people like we were talking about.
One?
Yeah.
His other account?
Yeah.
I still haven't gotten an opportunity to get in to look at it.
We'll see what we can find, but I'm going to assume I have no control over any of that. Oh, I just changed the name of my account. Yeah, okay, I can see that. Twitchy observes, fine beeswax candles were considered a suitable enough church gift from the nobles. Yep, 100%. That's how valuable beeswax candles were. But, people often like to imagine, when they imagine a medieval feast, they imagine a table laden with candles. No. And there's a lot of really good practical reasons for that. They actually had chandeliers that where candles were mounted for light in spaces. And they also had torches that were actually wall sconces. Torches were definitely a way of creating a lot of light in an interior space. Candlesticks on tables in large quantities, not so much. for many reasons, to actually light enough candles on tables to actually create enough light to see and dance and play music and do all the things. You're going to set your table on fire, as some of you may have found out from trying to create enough light with candles, just table candles. Two, in medieval table service, especially in formal settings, very often, very often tables were served from one side. So very often at formal feasts and banquets, people sat on only one side of the table so that the servers could cleanly and beautifully serve from the vacant side. If you've got candles in the way, it's going to make table service harder. So great spaces were much more often, halls, dining halls, etc., were much more often illuminated with torches and candles that are actually part of chandeliers, basically suspended lighting systems instead. Right. Makes a lot more sense, right? Which is not to say that there were no candlesticks put on tables. I'm not making that statement.
Are you going to continue for a while? Do they want music accompaniment?
Yeah, I guess we're going to continue for a little while. I'm confident they wouldn't mind some twinkling in the background. Okay, questions. Let me see. Still no resolution to the other. Yeah. Yeah, sorry. So just to be clear, this is not a religious channel, and I will not get into religious discussions on it unless it's from a, historical perspective. Talking about religion as part of history, or churches and whatnot as part of history, but this is definitely discussing modern religion. I try to avoid that at all costs on this channel. This is not the place for that. This is my happy, beautiful medieval court life place. Practice your lute, Twitchy says in all caps. We are keeping you accountable. See? Let's see. So what other interesting books? Oh, in the cooking department, we returned with some very interesting publications from one of the cooks guilds in an SCA group in Seattle. Their culinary guild actually focuses every year. They focus on a particular cuisine and geography, and then they publish this publication they call the Feudal Gourmet. It's a play on the Frugal Gourmet, if any of you remember that show from the 80s. And we actually bought a bunch of their publications. Could you pass me the silk road?
All of them. Just two of them aren't here yet.
No, okay. I know it's not mirrored. There it is. The Silk Road, A Culinary Journey to the East. So they make these write-ups where they present all of their recipes. They provide their blurb, their information about it. They provide the original, and then they provide an actual recipe. So yeah, this was one they did on the Silk Road, A Culinary Journey to the East, which I think starts in Venice, goes to the Middle East, and then ends in Mongolia. So 14th century Venetian recipes, 13th century Middle Eastern recipes, and then 14th century Mongolian recipes. And everything is carefully researched and carefully redacted and carefully reconstructed. So yeah, lots of very interesting. They have a series of these on a wide variety of cuisines from the Middle Ages, from across Eurasia. So yeah, can highly recommend, but I don't think you can buy these online.
No.
So I guess you have to go to an SCA event in Seattle to get them.
Oh, my book's missing. No.
Let me see. In my old town in Washington, we often lost power to about half the city every year. I got used to lighting a house with candles. It's not easy, and we had a 2-bedroom. Yeah, it's not easy, and it's not particularly safe to have candles and candlesticks because they tend to fall over. As we found at one event I ran where we all woke up the next morning, and whoever had been the last people in the dining hall, they did not blow the candles out before they went to bed. How fun is that? Like, wouldn't you think that would be obvious? We're the last people in this hall. Maybe we should blow out these candles, but they didn't. So guess what we found the next morning? We found that a candle had, surprisingly, fallen over while burning and scorched the table. Thankfully, it self-extinguished. I had some words for our guests at that because I didn't know who it was. I had some suspicions, so I had a general announcement for everyone, just to remind you all: if you were the last people in the hall, blow out the damned candles. This shouldn't be hard. Probably they were inebriated because that's what happens at medieval living history events. Am I right or am I right? And so probably they were too drunk to realize they should blow out the candles. But that story could have had a much more horrifying ending than it just did. Let me see. Takeda says they have an amazing Cooks Guild out there in most of Antir. Yeah, and the Madrona Cooks Guild, the Cooks Guild in Seattle, is super high speed. Long tradition. I mean, Seattle's known to be a foodie place anyway, so it kind of goes there. Yeah. Yeah, K Meeks, exactly. Yeah. So K Meeks, just so you know, in my chat, the chat that I can see for the live stream, I don't get to see the emojis usually. In your case, I get to see a description which says Contessa thoughtful candle face orange biting nails. It actually writes it out, so I can imagine what the emoji is supposed to look like. Why did you put it down?
I don't know where my music is.
Did you unpack it?
I did. Oh, wait. This is it.
This is a chance to not use your music, to play from memory. The condottiero might have to play from memory, everyone.
Listen to the horrible attempt to make it from guitar to lute.
Oh, really? I don't think anyone wants to hear that.
Nobody wants to hear that.
So yeah, fire safety. You know, one of the things we love doing in medieval living history is open flames, and I 100% agree that LED candles are no compensation for open flames. For one, they're about a 20th of the lumen, so you don't get very much light from LED candles, but also the atmosphere. But for that, you need to make sure you take precautions, like having, yes, I know, modern fire extinguishers at regular locations. Make sure everyone knows how to use them. Make sure they're up to date and not expired. You know, yes, I know it's going to having a giant red fire extinguisher there and at multiple locations in your hall will detract from the look of your hall. On the other hand, being dead from a fire will really ruin the look of the hall. Tickle that lute, tickle it. Is that you just playing from memory?
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Well done, Hanson.
I remember that one.
Nice. That was from memory, everyone, because we can't find the music because God knows where it got put since he returned and didn't really unpack properly. Also, can you hear me and still hear the music, or is one unknowingly dominating over the other? Let me know.
No, I don't remember this one.
Okay, let's see what this looks like if we turn it right side out. Okay, not bad. I'm going to call that good enough, as they say. So the next step, because I can't really iron this because I don't have a needle board, and if you're going to iron velvet, you have to have a needle board. You can't iron it without a needle. You could try to iron it on a terry cloth towel. I wouldn't do it. Ooh, 5 stars from Shellback Bow.
Oh, thank you.
Nice.
So here I can try and play this, see if anyone actually recognizes what I'm trying to play.
Amazing ambiance. You're impressive. You're getting all kinds of compliments, Handsome. And give out lammies with clear instruction that those wretches who fail to blow out candles will be put in the stocks. Yeah, 100% Twitchy Witch. We hear you. It's not distracting from your answers. Great. Okay, fantastic. That is the hope. Okay, so because I don't have a needle board, so I can't iron this, but I do want it to stay open and not get all twisted around when it's in the lining. I'm going to go ahead and whip stitch the now sort of frilly edges down so that it lays nice and flat, and so that it doesn't end up creating weird bunching that'll then feel pressed against my skin. So that's one of the really important reasons to fell your seams. Felling means to fold them basically iron them flat or flatten them out on either side, and then whip stitch it down or secure it with some kind of stitch. Whip stitch for the win, baby. That's one of the really important reasons to do that. Even if it's on the inside and there's a lining, I still do that because it makes it so that the seam doesn't bunch up in weird ways, you know, when it gets worn, right? So that it all lays nice and flat and stays flat even with wearing, because I can feel whether it's flat or not against my skin. And I don't mean like I can tell it's not perfect. No, I mean it's bunching up in places and it's uncomfortable. So yeah, you definitely want to make sure, if you care about comfort and it's a fitted garment, that you fill your seams and stitch them. So I'm about to do that now. But before I do that, I have to make certain that I've actually gotten made all the appropriate snips, the easing snips that I'll need to make so that it actually lies open properly.
See, I don't remember the tune to Dance to Cleves, so I don't know if I'm playing this right.
Oh.
5.
That's not bad. Do you need me to hum the tune for you? This one needs more. This is one he's just recently started learning, so be kind. 'This is actually one of my favorite dances. I have a tutorial on this dance on my YouTube channel, if any of you are interested in checking that out. Danse de Cleve, D-A-N-S-E space D-E space C-L-E-V-E-S, Danse de Cleve. It was actually a dance that was popular, we're pretty certain, in the Burgundian court. And it is one of the interesting basse danse in that it actually, the music isn't just a tenor line, there's actually a really complex melody that's provided. Because for the most part, when it comes to the basse danse and the basse danse in the 15th century, the only music that's provided is a tenor line with 1 or maximum 2 notes per measure. And so the rest is just an improvised melody, but Danse de Cleve actually has a really complex melody, as you can hear. So the dance is also really beautiful. It's got these beautiful, very sexy and flirtatious figures to it, where you're coming away and going back towards each other and doing opposing things in this sort of separation and reunion dance. It's a really fun, sexy, slow dance, Danse de Cleve. As I said, I do have a tutorial on my YouTube channel if you're interested in checking that out. Okay, Captain, sleep well. Hope to see you tomorrow. Who was the most fashionable famous woman in the Middle Ages? Well, in any given era, I would say in the 12th century, I would probably go for Aliénor d'Aquitaine, Eleanor of Aquitaine, as she's sometimes called. She was, she broke the mold. She broke the mold and she broke all conventions and she blazed her own path. Yeah, if you ever want to read about a very interesting woman, read about Eleanor of Aquitaine. She was the Duchess of Aquitaine in her own right because she inherited the duchy from her father. She was Queen of France first and then the Queen of England. She went on crusade. She maybe possibly had an affair with her uncle. We're pretty certain that I say maybe possibly, but you know. She led her sons in rebellion against their father, Henry II, her husband, the king. She outlived them all, by the way, most of her sons and her husbands, and died a very respectably aged stateswoman who had led multiple kingdoms and multiple polities. Very educated, very erudite. Yeah, Aliénor d'Aquitaine, Eleanor of Aquitaine for the win for the 12th century.
Did you hear how bad that was? That was Ding Dong Merrily on High and the guitar tab.
Oh God, I couldn't even tell you what you were playing. Danse du Clève a pop anthem? It does not have a song, so it was not a pop. It was not a pop tune. Like there are dances in the 15th century. There are absolutely pop tunes. This is not one of them. This was definitely court. This was a court dance. It was not a pop tune. It was court dance. 100% dancing from the court of the upper classes, and that's probably why a melody was provided, because it wasn't a pop tune. Whereas all the other dances for which we have instructions and just the bare tenor, those were pop tunes. Everyone knew how they went, so you didn't need to actually write down the melody. That's my theory, and especially because when you look at the names of these 15th century dances that have no music provided, the name is absolutely a pop tune, like I Will Die for Your Tears, The Life, one of my favorite, and some of them we actually have the songs for, so that's fun. One of my favorite bas danse, French, the dances that were popular in the style of France and Burgundy, and England actually enjoyed them as well, the bas danse. One of my favorite is called Filles à Marier, which literally means marriageable girls. And it is a battle of the sexes song. You can find this. There's a couple of really excellent performances of it of the song actually on YouTube. Filles à Marier, Filles space A space Marier. Filles à Marier. And it's a battle of sexes between men and women in which they're singing against each other at the same time. So you've got this fantastic 4 voices singing over top of each other. Gorgeous song. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. And basically the lyrics that the women are saying, it's a warning from the women to other women. Don't get married. Don't get married, or beware, do not marry a jealous man, because they will treat you badly and you will be miserable. Basically, the warning to the men, from the men to the men, is don't marry a pretty woman, because if you do, you'll be miserable. She will cause you trouble, basically. And they're basically singing over top of each other and against each other. So it's a great song, super fun. Absolutely was a pop tune. You can absolutely imagine a group of men and women getting together and just saying, okay, Filles à Marier, let's go, and just breaking up and like laughing at each other and poking at each other and having a good old time. Another one of my favorite songs is it's got to be a drinking song. The song is called La Vita di Colino, The Life of Colin. And the lyrics are basically about the misadventures of this man named Colino. And it involves him doing just a variety of dumb ass things and paying the price for it. And the chorus of this song translates to the chorus is literally just them saying, oh, 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 oh. And the opening, the first verse of the song is the life of Colin won't last very long. Like, oh shit. And there's a verse where he ends up drunk, passed out in a ditch, and yeah, and there's a really fun 3-person dance for that. I also have a tutorial for that on my Creative Contessa YouTube channel. The life of Colin, La Vita di Colino. Yeah, that's I think we call it a merry threesome or something like that on the channel. It's the tutorial. It's not a simple dance. It has a lot of footwork. There's the song. There's 5 verses and 5 choruses, and they all change. They're all different. So the tutorial is 1 hour and 10 minutes long. It's definitely not a beginner dance by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a fun one. And once you get it down, it's super fun. It's super flirty, and the music is really upbeat. The music is more upbeat than it deserves to be, considering what you're singing. The music is da 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 da. Da 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 da. Right? It seems like it's so perky, and then you start listening to the lyrics in Italian, and you start thinking to yourself, "This isn't perky. This is tragic."
This is so not
Yeah.
right.
So yeah, the more I've been doing research, and many of you might not know, my primary area of expertise, other than fashion history, is dance and music history. And so, my research into medieval dance, the more I really start discovering, finding sources, and the more digitized resources are becoming available with original manuscripts, what I'm learning is that what I'm figuring out is that a lot of the dances for which we have choreographic descriptions but no music, it's because the dance was choreographed to fit a popular song from the era. Just like now, if you go to a party or a wedding in the West, you're probably going to hear the electric slide or the cha-cha or the electric cha-cha or a lot of the Cotton Eye Joe, right? These group dances, these group line dances where the song came first and then someone created a dance to the fun, silly song. Same thing for a lot of 15th century dances, which is why a lot of the titles don't really make sense for the dance, because the dance doesn't seem to be depicting the title until you realize that there's a pop tune with that name and people just wanted to be able to dance to their favorite songs. A chicken dance, exactly, Faye. How many languages do I speak? Fluently. Albeit rusty. I'm still fluent in German. I can still hold forth in German about pretty much any subject. French and Spanish I'm also fluent in, but I'm rusty because I haven't had a lot of chance to practice them actively in a long time. Italian I have occasionally been fluent in. Reading and writing is still fine. It's, just I don't get a lot of chance to practice speaking those. I've had a semester of Portuguese and I can understand Brazilian Portuguese with no problem. I can understand Portuguese a little, like 50%. Let me see. I can speak Korean like a 4-year-old and understand at about that level, although maybe more like a 3-year-old's listening comprehension. Let's see. I have had a semester of Mandarin, but basically that semester focused mostly on writing and not speaking. And also more on pronunciation because of the complexities of Mandarin and its tonal pronunciation. So we actually didn't get much speaking actually done. Anyway. So yeah, I'm a linguist by trade. So languages actually come kind of easily to me. Really. So this is, you can see how much better that looks now that it's all nice and flat versus chaos, order. Yeah, do any of you do any medieval dancing or play a medieval instrument? Do you have a favorite medieval dance or medieval song, favorite medieval tune? On my YouTube channel, I have a whole massive playlist of medieval dance and Renaissance dance. So you can learn, if you're interested in learning, you can try out any of the numerous tutorials I have there. Once I get a space again, I'm planning on doing some Zoom classes. And I think I'm going to stick to the format that I really like the best. They will be paid, but it will be pay what you can. So, if you can only afford to pay $5 for the classes, that's fine. If you can afford to pay $100, great, whatever, right? But I need, currently the only space I have for that is the rooftop, and it's real cold right now. So maybe in the spring when it gets warmer again, I can do classes on the rooftop. I can run an Ethernet cable up the stairs and do classes that way. Okay, so there we are. Look at that. See how nicely you can actually look. Side-by-side comparison, real easy. No finishing, no whip stitching it down, right? You can tell which one is going to feel more comfortable against my clothing. This is Danse de Cleve again, in case you're wondering. What am I making? A great question. So this is the sleeve cuff lining for my Burgundian overgown. So the gown that will go over top of these 2 layers. Actually, it's going to be made of black wool, and this is basically it's a cuff like that, right? And it's actually going to be on the inside, so it will actually be more like this. will be on the inside of the sleeve like this, and then it'll be covered up to here. So you'll see the sleeve to here, but then when I want to fold the cuffs back so that I have more free use of my hands, or it's a little warm, or whatever the reason might be, then I can fold it back and I have this nice cuff like that. See? That's what it is. So that is what I'm working on. And I'm now in the process of whip stitching down the seam so that it lies flat, so that it's flat like this and not chaotic like this. So that is what I'm working on. And this is the sleeve in question. Damn. Twitchy. The sleeve is covered in fabric wormies. Okay, so I'll go ahead and demonstrate again. Now this will actually be attached. The cuff lining will actually be attached. It's not just going to be a separate piece. But yeah, it's going to be the cuff lining basically. So this is the sleeve, right? Right. And this is how it looks when it's uncuffed. Now, I'm just going to put it in for now, but it's going to actually be properly sewn into place here, so you can get an idea of how it's going to look. Okay, so this is sort of more or less-ish how it will look when it's unfolded. So you'll actually see the top there peeking through. Look at that beautiful how it shines in the light, right? Maybe not quite that much. There'll be a little bit peeking through, but anyway. And then when if I want to cuff the sleeve back, this will obviously all sit much more nicely once it's all actually sewn together properly. But basically this is how it will look.
And page
right? Isn't that beautiful, the contrast between the wool and the silky furriness of the sleeve? Yeah, I love it. I'm really happy how it looks. Yeah, the luxurious black. Yeah, this doe skin is just gorgeous, and you know the way it shines itself. Oh, it is. It feels luxury. It totally feels luxury. Yep. It is. When people ask me, isn't wool scratchy? I'm like, no, quality top-end wool is absolutely not scratchy. Top-end wool is like, it's like silk, right? It's so wonderful. So, okay, now I have to figure out how to get this off without them being together. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, right. Like, I know it can be hard to imagine what on earth is this thing, right? Like what is it? But now that you see it put together, right? Isn't it quite lovely? Yeah. So welcome. You guys get the first preview of how the final sleeve is going to look. So I got this doe skin from Royal Blue Traders. They are on Instagram. I think they were buying their fabrics from England, but I might be wrong about that. Royal Blue Traders. So I got this amazing black wool. Royal Blue Traders. They have a website and they're on Instagram. Ian from Royal Blue Traders. He's a friend. He's darling. He's a lovely person. Lots of fun to be around. Can highly recommend checking out their website. They have really high quality wool. They also have a lot of hand sewing notions. My buttonholer, my reproduction buttonholer, I got from him. Got from Royal Blue Traders as well. Right. So if you ever wondered how buttonholes should actually be made, it's using a buttonholer like this. You basically put it on top of the fabric, you hammer it, and it cuts straight through the fabric in one perfect clean line. No need for scissors, no need for razors, no need for hurting yourself. Perfect buttonhole every single time. Buttonholer for the win. Yep. So that's also from where I bought the buttonholer. Was from Ian at Royal Blue Traders. Oh gosh, Twitchy, I didn't realize that the UK was currently having issues with wool supply. That's horrifying. I'm so sorry to hear that. And how frustrating also. I mean, there was an issue, technical issues at the mills. What happened? Did all the mills get sabotaged or something? Oh, thank you, Valik. Appreciate that compliment. Just put an order in for 8.5 8.5 yards of nice and dense fine broadcloth. Oh, nice. Takeda, was that from Royal Blue Traders or from someone else?
I skipped a line.
You skipped a line.
Oops.
Yeah, when I found this wool at Penzic a year and a half ago, I just my hands brushed across it and I just went, oh my God, it's so silky. It's so silky. Why is it so silky? And yeah, the rest was history. Yeah, it was, and honestly, it was only $30 a yard. And I know some of you are going to scream, oh my God, that's so expensive, but not for a silky, fine quality broadcloth doe skin wool like this. Not at all. Not expensive at all. Really not. So yeah, love this stuff. Is it just gorgeous? Look at that. Ah, so beautiful. Yeah, this stuff is so silky. It's just and so this puts a lie to scratchy wool, right? It's wool will be scratchy if it's not processed properly to take away the things that make it scratchy, right? Lanolin is one of the things that helps contribute to that, but also the burrs in the wool, right? That can all be processed away, basically. So yeah, silky, silky. Yeah, love this stuff. It's like I can see myself losing. Okay, I've got to stop petting the wool. Stop petting the wool, Contessa. Bad Contessa, no biscuit. No more wool petting. That sounds so dirty. Okay, moving on. Back to sewing. Oh dear, I put my needle down somewhere and now it's gone. It's over here. Okay, questions. Oh, I see, hon. Yeah. From someone else, we'll post the source in the Discord. Oh, super cool, Takeda. Appreciate that. Yeah, for those who are wondering, when we keep occasionally mention the Discord, I have a Creative Contessa Discord server, which is one of the perks I offer to my patrons and my channel members. And we do things like share resources for fabric. I post a lot of extra resources there when I discover a new digital resource, when I discover a new book, when I learn something new, I share it there, new research, new information, tutorials, videos that I find useful in my historical creativity. And we just chat, we share our projects, we ask questions, share lessons learned. So if you're interested in joining my Creative Contessa Discord server, just become a patron or a channel member at any level and you will get access. Oh, there's also, so issues with the wool industry. There's also a decrease in sheep farmers thanks to the economy. Yeah, that is not surprising, not at all. Yeah, getting wool from Australia is, it's not that we don't want to, it's a question of getting it. If you're in the US, there's an issue with tariffs. Fantastic. But that might be a reason I might want to go down to Australia. I'm currently in Korea. Australia's only a 10-hour flight away. Going down to Australia and doing some wool shopping myself, perhaps. That might be a thing I might actually really consider doing. I've been wanting to get down to see Australia and especially New Zealand. That could be a really good reason to do that. Let me see. I would bet the wool shepherds don't have the current right to repair their own equipment and are a victim of planned obsolescence. You know, Kay Meeks. Yep, that sounds about right. Right? Yeah, really, yes. Yeah. So, do any of you have any wool garments? Have any of you avoided wool because you thought it would be too uncomfortable? If you have avoided it because it would be too uncomfortable, definitely try a good broadcloth wool. Will change your mind. Doe skin will really change your mind. Remember that wool blankets, for instance, are not fashion wool. They were not woven, they were not processed or woven to be worn as garments. So if you're making garments from wool blankets, they will be a little scratchy, 100%.
So this one's like brand new. I've never played this song. This is one of the ones I found from that website. That
not Rustability? Okay.
No, not Russell. This is Adu ma très belle maîtresse. I don't know.
15th century French for the win.
Woo! It's even got the words. like this DE combination here. Come on, can do it.
Yeah, that is part of the problem when technology, when the people who know how to maintain the technology are gone and there's no one to take over. In essence, you're experiencing how the Roman Empire actually ended. It was not, you know, it wasn't that one day the aqueducts were working and the next day they weren't working.
Let me try this.
Eventually, the people who, there weren't enough people to actually keep those things in operation. Well, one, because of the Justinian plague, but the Justinian plague not only reduced the numbers in general, it reduced the people who knew how to do it, and then the people who survived weren't the ones who knew how to maintain all that technology. And so it ended up being upcycled into other buildings, into other structures. And so that's really how the Roman Empire in the West ended, how the technology stopped being available, why people stopped knowing how to do those things, because Justinian plague killed off all the people who knew how, and there weren't enough people to figure out how to do it again. Yeah, same thing seems to be happening. How do I make a cotton t-shirt from scratch? Man, a cotton t-shirt. So you're talking about a knit, like out of a cotton knit? I mean, you can buy knit fabric. T-shirts are definitely not complicated. Now, if you're talking about weaving your cotton from scratch, cotton is not one of the fibers I know as much about as other fibers, but if you're talking about weaving, you're going to need to start with an apprenticeship and be taught all of the stages of production step by step, and then work your way up from there. But otherwise, t-shirts are pretty simple. It's 2 rectangles and it's 4 rectangles. Rectangle, 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 rectangle. And that's it. It's not hard. T-shirts are super easy.
I think I need to hear this one too. Confirm des confirm. Oh God, it's multiple pages.
The sheep farmers are just priced out by the fact that wool doesn't pay at all thanks to synthetics from China. Yeah, I know. I wish. That's a real problem that people, well, when people are lazy, and modern people are especially lazy, and they don't want to have garments that they actually have to care for, right? They don't want a garment they can't just toss in the washing machine and then toss in the dryer. And while wool isn't as fussy as some people think it is, you definitely can't do that with it. You'll ruin it. You will shrink your garment into something the size of a neutron star. So, you know, because of that, people would rather have microplastics coating their bodies and polluting their environment than have a nice natural fiber that does none of those things. And that actually breathes and doesn't smell bad when you sweat. So yeah, no, you are right. That is a big problem. That it's the cheap fabric coming out of China, because we've got plenty of wool. Like there's wool in massive quantities. Our poor sheep have been bred to be massive wool producers, but now there's suddenly supposedly no demand. I just wish we could convince people to buy fewer garments, have them made out of natural fibers like wool, and it would just, like, overnight, a lot of our environmental issues would go away. Just if we stopped with with fast fashion and all the synthetics. Yeah, I'm not saying it would fix everything, but it would resolve some of the bigger issues anyway. And it's tragic because you have these sheep who have been bred selectively over centuries to produce more and more and more wool. And now they're to the point where if someone doesn't shear these sheep, they die of an impacted bowel because they can't actually defecate unless they're shorn on a regular basis. If they are not shorn on a regular basis, then they cannot actually evict waste products from their bodies, and they die a horrible death. So it's just so tragic. It's tragic for the sheep. It's tragic for the shepherds, for the sheep farmers. It's just sad all around. Which is also why lamb is much more easy to procure now than it was in the Middle Ages. funny that. Oh, you know what I didn't do, everyone? I was talking to you all. I was holding forth and I forgot to wax my thread, and the thread knotted on itself really badly. So I've had to just snap it off and start again. Smoothing my thread by running it through a nice block of beeswax, like so. Let me see. Does your husband know Layla by Eric Clapton? I don't think so. He's playing a lute. He's pretty much only 15th and 16th century music. Let me see. I'm doing my part by wearing my wonderful sickbed made woolen cloak. Got so many compliments. Fantastic. Mass production and animal slavery is evil. Yeah, mass production definitely has its problems. Now, granted, to be realistic, if we got rid of mass production for everything, we would have a sharp die-off in many cases. And I'm not certain I'm willing to condemn half of the planet's population to death. But we can certainly approach production and manufacturing from a much more, and consumption, from a much more sustainable perspective than we are doing. And that starts with personal choices. If I hear one more defeatist say, oh, it doesn't matter what I do, the companies will still manufacture and pollute and waste, so it doesn't matter if I do as well. There's more than 7 billion people on the planet. Of course it matters how we consume as individuals. Of course it matters. It's cumulative. Soapbox off. Which is why one of the things I love about studying medieval material culture, because there are so many fantastic lessons learned about how we could live a more sustainable, more environmentally friendly lifestyle, but also a lifestyle that would reduce our anxiety, it would reduce our stress, it would bring us into closer contact with each other. You know, for instance, the idea of circular consumption, how an object should be used and reused until it can be used no more, rather than just throwing it away and piling it into a landfill. You know, medieval people, the life cycle of medieval linen, for instance, this garment, this linen, eventually it will wear out in certain key places where no amount of repair will work. So once that happens, once I can no longer successfully repair it, and I have a couple of linen smocks that have achieved that status, I will take it and I will turn them, I will cut it up into smaller pieces, and I will make linen food wrap, waxed linen food wraps out of them. And then when that wears out, it could be turned, the linen could then be turned into, the linen could then be turned, oh my God, what the hell happened here? The linen could then be turned into paper, rag paper. Most of you maybe did not realize that medieval paper wasn't made from wood pulp. It was made from fabric, from linen. Because what you do is you take the linen, you pound the hell out of it using water-driven hammers, actually, and then that turns it into pulp. You take the pulp, put it through a mold, and screen it out and dry it out, and thus you have paper. So yeah, that would be one possible next step in the life cycle of this linen. It's created a really bad knot that I don't care. I'm just gonna keep going. Yeah, so applying all of that idea of the circular consumption, of using it until it disintegrates, I'm trying to apply that increasingly to my lifestyle. It takes a lot more work though, which is why it's easier if you live in a household, in a group of people, and you all do this together, and then one of you could be in charge of, say, making rag paper if you decided you wanted to make rag paper, right? Then it's not just one person trying to do everything, because that's another thing that I've learned from studying medieval material culture and medieval social structures. People didn't live alone in the pre-modern, in the pre-20th century world. People did pre-World War II. People did not live alone. They lived with nearly always they lived multiple generations to a household, which means that the household labor load was split up amongst many hands. So it wasn't just one person who had to do the laundry and do the dishes and do the cleaning and do the cooking, right? Everyone had their own role in the household, and everyone shared the work, right? So that's another thing we could maybe take away. And also then you're less depressed and you're less anxious because you don't have to make plans to go see friends. You live with people, I mean, you should still have friends and you should still go see them, but it's not the only way that you get contact with humans, right? You have contact with humans from your daily life, and not just, you know, your husband, your spouse, or your children, right? It's all great to have a spouse and children, but you need other adults too. So, you know, these are things I've all learned from studying medieval history, and I don't think it's a coincidence that we have such high rates of depression and anxiety now that people are increasingly living alone. Yeah. Let me see. Oh, well, thank you, Clarity. Appreciate that. Let me see. Most Western nations' paper was linen based for centuries up until the mid to late 1800s. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, in Asia, it was, you know, often rice paper. It still is traditional paper. Hanji is rice paper, but still, yeah. Up until the 19th century, yeah, it was fabric based, linen, and I think cotton also, as cotton became more popular. Twitchy made a good comment about why she thinks all the lovely linen coats didn't survive because they turned into paper. So the other problem with linen garments is they don't survive the archaeological layers in the archaeological record very well because they rot. Linen cellulose is much more likely to rot than animal fibers are. So even if people were buried in their linen garments, those linen garments would have disintegrated in most cases. The exception is here in Korea, which is just like the exception to everything, where their style of burial in the Joseon dynasty created an anaerobic environment in their tombs, and so all the garments survived. Silk, linen, the few wool ones that there were, really remarkable, actually. Or not linen, silk, rami, cotton. Silk, rami, cotton. Silk, rami, cotton. No linen. There is no linen in pre-modern Korea. There just isn't. It's not a plant that grows in Asia. Not in Eastern Asia, anyway. Let me see. I have bought from Royal Blue before. I usually catch them in person at the Fort Frederick Market Fair. That makes sense. And when they attend the Fort Lute Market Days. Yep, that all makes sense. I know Ian does a lot of different markets, and he is at Pennsic for 2 weeks. Takeda, Pennsic, man, Pennsic. Come on. Oh, wow. That went more quickly than I was expecting. This seam is now finished. Okay. Are you just random strumming now?
Nah, this is strumming the last note.
Oh, okay.
Of Le Russe.
Have we broken down to the 4 chords of Wonderwall?
That's right. Yeah.
Oh my God. What a great video that is on YouTube. There's this great video on YouTube about how to pick up chicks if you play the guitar. It's supposed to be funny, right? It's funny. It's intentionally funny. And it's this professional guitarist, and I'm pretty certain he teaches guitar. Like that's what he does professionally in addition to playing guitar professionally. And it opens up with, you know, playing the guitar is a great way to pick up chicks. But, you know, there are like at least 36 different chords you need to learn if you really want to play the guitar well. But you only need 4 to play Wonderwall. And then he starts playing these 4 chords. And as the video goes on, like more and more women just appear all around him. And then eventually he's like, and if you forget the tune, no problem. Just beat in rhythm on your guitar like you're some kind of acoustic musical god. And they'll sing along for you. And then at the very end of the video, it says, next week's lesson is how to pick up chicks by playing the bass guitar. And there's like no chicks.
There's one chick. Right?
There's one chick.
Oh, and then we do this. And then there's this note.
Yeah, it's a pretty, for those of you who play guitar, you will definitely appreciate it. Or play any stringed instrument. Oh, Isabeau is on. She says, you sound great, Ryan.
Oh, hi. Culinary still don't have a job.
Yeah, we still don't have a job. Thank you, dumpster fire that is the U.S. government right now. Okay, backing away from that topic. So you can see how important it is to finish those seams. See how nice that lays now? Nice and following the sexy curve of my wrist, right? You probably never thought about wrist as being sexy before, but now you will. Yeah, E-Man, check out that video. It's hysterical. Absolutely worth a watch. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same process with this cuff. Once again, I'm going to make the easing stitches here so that it will actually, I can actually make it lay flat nicely. And then we will proceed from there. But you know, I just had a thought. I think I might need to actually make this seams tighter on this because, okay, so considerations, right? So some of you may know I don't use commercial patterns. I make all of my own patterns for everything myself, which means there's always a bit of a trial and error process. And this is the first time I've done this style of lining for my cuff. And also the first time I've used velvet. Velvet, I think we've just been discussing, is very three-dimensional. This is going on the inside of this sleeve. And I did not take that into consideration when I did the seam allowances on this. So I think I'm actually going to have to make this tighter because I think it's going to be too bulky otherwise inside of this sleeve. Because even, you can even see it actually. Even without the stitches, you can see how much wider this is than this, right? This is very clearly more narrow than this. So I'm pretty certain I'm going to actually have to take this in and make it tighter. I might actually have to do that on this, which means all of that wonderful work I just did might be for naught. I might have to redo it. How fun is that thought? But that means I'm going to want to do that now before I do all the finishing work there. So yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and give it another try just to make sure my theory is correct. I'm pretty certain I'm correct. Okay, so this is the other sleeve. I'm about to turn it right side out and try it on. Yeah, you can see how nice and slender that is there in the wrist area versus how not slender that is there in the wrist area. So I'm pretty certain I'm going to have to redo those seams. I didn't really think about that the lining should be narrower than the actual thing that goes over it. Oh, this feels so nice. When this goes on over the sleeve, I don't feel constrained in any way. So nice. See like how nice that looks? Okay. So now I'm just going to try this on for try-on purposes, but I'm pretty certain my theory is correct. Okay, so I lied. He knows apparently a 19th century song.
What?
Frere Jacques, it's a 19th century song.
I taught myself that.
And he figured out the music, how to play the music on the lute for Frere Jacques.
I just figured out the runaway part. Right.
Yeah, that's way too bulky. Look at how much extra there is there versus how much not extra there is here. Yeah, okay. We're gonna have to take the seams in here. No problem. We just start from scratch. Yeah, when you're hand sewing, it is a little frustrating when you have to take seams in because it's a lot more work than if you're using a machine. Okay, technically I don't have to hand sew this. I have a machine. This is on the inside. I don't care if it's visible, but it's something I can do in these medieval sewing parties. I'm not going to sew on a machine in a medieval sewing party. There it is. It also means I'm going to have to redo these whip stitches. Oh, how fun is that? Lots of redoing. Oh, makes me so happy. Okay, well, everyone, we are coming up on 3 hours, so it's probably time for me to call it good on today's live stream. I would like to thank my patrons and my channel members for supporting my work financially. I really appreciate everything you guys do, your generosity. I would like to thank the rest of you for participating in this stream. Don't forget to like and subscribe and the notification bell. It's very important that you hit the notification bell and that you check to make sure that all is actually ticked. If all is not ticked, then unfortunately you will not be notified when I go live with everything. You'll only be notified when the algorithm, the almighty algorithm, the controller, the governor of our lives, decides you should know when I do things like go live. So click on all if you really want to know when I actually publish new things or go live. Speaking of which, tomorrow, or maybe later today for some of you, I will be going live again with Philip from Irish Medieval History. I will be working on more sewing projects, and we will be talking about life in medieval France. So come with your questions, ask, bring your curiosity. We're going to be sharing our knowledge of the beauties, the wonders, the joys, the tribulations, also of living in medieval France. My focus will mostly be on 14th and 15th century France. So if that isn't something that might interest you to hear an interesting live show with my colleague Philip, then please do join us. He has a charming Irish accent. I think you'll love it. And if you're interested in becoming a patron on Patreon, or a channel member, the Creative Contessa on both, host of perks, including my Creative Contessa Discord and access to hours and hours and hours of extra content, tutorials, extra vlogs, raw footage where I'm actually still talking and saying stupid things. Behind the scenes bloopers that no one else gets to see. All our perks for my patrons and channel members. Thank you all so much for watching. Appreciate you all. Welcome to the community of the Creative Contessas, what some of us are starting to call my court. I hope to see you all tomorrow. Stay creative, guys. I don't know how to end the stream anymore.